just the pork chop dinner for that. The second event that I'm requesting the road closure is for us to do our annual hose testing through the department. That is the entire Main Street. Just like last year, I would go door to door, speak to everybody on Main Street, explain to them what we're going to be doing. That is June 14th, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, finishing up somewhere around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Whenever we're done, that's when the road will open back up. Last year went very, very smoothly. Actually, it went a lot better than I expected it to. With people moving vehicles and everything, I actually only had one car that had to be moved, and it was no issue at all. So that's what we're requesting.
Forgive me, what were the times again? The dinner was?
Dinner is, road closure for the dinner would be 5 to midnight. And for the 14th, for the hose testing would be 8 to 3 o'clock.
8 a.m.
8 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's something I'll put on the agenda for the next meeting, April 5th. We can vote on it then and then let you know. You're welcome to stay or you're welcome to.
Okay.
Up to you.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Genty there's a no-show, so.
Yeah. So Rails to Trails update. Who's grabbing that one?
It will be, first we'll do the environmental. And I gotta figure out here how to, can I minimize this?
Yeah.
I printed those before I knew that you did, so if anybody wants a little larger one, I brought
Click
them.
on that again and click exit full screen. There you go. And then you can.
Are you
Thank you,
printing
ma'am.
some too?
I did before I came back to my computer and saw that you printed them.
That's fine. Click OK and
They're
then
all
just
over
open
now.
up.
So give me one quick one.
Want to go to my desktop?
You'll have
So
to go to
click
your
on the
folder. You'll have to
folder.
go to your folder.
Yeah, the folder at the bottom. And go to your desktop folder. There you go.
Are your pictures bigger than this?
That's why.
Yeah, just pass it.
Do your asterisks go somewhere?
Huh?
Do the asterisks go somewhere on yours? Next to Rollins then?
Oh, because when I typed this up, he hadn't spoken with it yet.
Oh,
That's
good.
my CYA. He spoke with him after I did that. If I also want a little larger pictures, it's
Go back to Zoom.
Yeah.
It's just larger.
Should have a share button down. And you select your. There you go. Share.
Who's the guy's name I talked to?
Name's Andy.
Yeah.
He does.
Okay,
these
can
for
you
us.
guys see those okay? Thank you.
You want to come up here, Brandon?
Yeah. I don't mind.
I don't mind a bit.
I did.
You can stay on the chair and take it.
You had all your shots? I had. Okay, here, go. There's a lot of information to cover, but I'm going to try to be brief. If there's something we need to dive into deeper, we can. I'm not trying to hurry this, but honestly, we could talk for weeks. We're not going to. So, what I wanted to do was kind of review where we were, what we have identified. We owe you a paper report that'll be extensive, but do not confuse activity with achievement. Just having a bunch of paper doesn't mean anything. What I wanted to do here was just summarize this. So, see if I can figure out how to operate this. What I've got here is just an overview of the trail.
You just have to scroll down to move to the next slides. Lower right-hand corner.
Yeah, there you go. So page down.
Arrow down.
Figure this out. So, all right, really quickly, some of you, I don't mean to get too far into the weeds here, but it's important to understand. I don't know if we've ever talked about, maybe you have, about the history of the railroad itself. It is known now as the Elm Industrial Lead. I don't know what Elm means. Caleb, maybe you do.
I didn't know where that. I wondered that myself.
Yeah. So, but that's how you'll identify it now, for some reason or another. And it was originally constructed by the Peoria Farmington Railroad Corp. Oddly, around the same time as the village of Hannah City. So it has a long and storied history, owned by Iowa Central, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Chicago Northwestern, and last Union Pacific. There have been a lot of various spurs and sightings in 140 years of this thing. And some of the pictures there, the one in the lower left is from 1905, and that poor farm is where the jail is at. That's where the galvanizing plant is at right now. You can see the spur sighting. Sighting is the correct word. There where the plant is located, and what you can see as it dives down into Kickapoo Creek Road there to the far eastern end of it. It's hard to see on our screen, but the one in the upper right is Middle Grove. But you can see under the M in middle, the sightings there is over close to the rail yard, or excuse me, the coal mine. I believe that one was from 1930, that one there. And the picture in the lower right is from 1950s, and that's out in Middle Grove. That's a train coming down those tracks in 1956 or 9, I think it was. So it's been there a while. It used to run from Peoria to Keithsburg and then connect up north to Minneapolis and parts unknown. From Keithsburg to Middle Grove was abandoned in 1976, but the part from Middle Grove to Peoria remained open until 1986. Or excuse me, 1986, when the mine was abandoned out in Middle Grove. It was abandoned by UP in 2008, and then the rail removal, various parts of it occurred between 2008 and 2010, and it has been an idle, revegetating railroad bed since then.
But not a true abandonment, not an STB abandonment,
Correct.
just ceased use.
Ceased to use, yeah,
Yeah.
that might matter, I suppose, I could use the right term. So what we're looking at here, again, just to summarize the geography of the thing, is it's 24.7 miles, and the parcel itself is parcels total about 218 acres from the eastern end of Kickapoo Creek Road to about 7/10 of a mile west of Middle Grove. Goes through the incorporated areas of Farmington, Hannah City, Bellevue, goes through rural Fulton and Peoria counties.
Just a correction there, Brandon. It's actually on the west side of Creek Road is where the abandonment starts,
Right.
instead of the east side. They kept the
On the
east
east
side.
end. I said, on the
Okay.
east, yeah, the eastern terminus, right, correct. It is on the west side of the road, you're right, where it kind of dives down into the road now, but it used to be a railroad. I wanted to mention that portions of this rail line, former rail line, they're easily traversed by vehicle. You could take an ATV or a gator, even a pickup truck down some portions of it, and some portions of it are completely inaccessible by any kind of vehicle. And I'm glad to have the deer out there west of Middle Grove to show us the way to get down the thing, because it was pretty congested. Just as a quick aside, one of the reasons it probably is because it has a gate. Can't get down it. Portions of it, So there's dozens of structures and wooden bridges and culverts and field tiles. One of the things that Tri-County put together, they had identified 6 structures. There's 6 structures. There's a lot more than 6 structures. Some large culverts on the eastern end, and some are just field tiles that run underneath it. So if you were to say, we want to know everything that crosses it, I think we would need to look at those licenses we've been talking about and do a really thorough physical condition assessment. There's a lot of good stuff out there. We took pictures of a lot of things, but the big wooden bridges, there are probably 4 or 5 of those. And there are some deeper culverts, but things that somebody would cross over, those are limited. The adjacent land uses along this thing, they do range from very rural or farm, portions of it that are actually farmed, to urban, I would call it. Within the village of Farmington, people use this thing. It's an extended backyard. It's a pretty urban setting there. And even when you get down into Peoria, I wouldn't call it urban, but it's much more used. But there are, again, as I mentioned, numerous utility crossings or numerous road crossings where one could get access to this if they wanted to. It is fairly flat. There are areas west of Farmington, kind of east of Hannah City, where Farmington Road ties into 116. And then from Bellevue down to the eastern terminus have various topography where stormwater is an issue, and we'll see some of that. In the eastern end, I would say, really from Maxwell Road down to Kickapoo Creek Road, it's a popular place. We were out there; the snow had melted, and there were a lot of very fresh tracks. It's used. Some folks use it as their driveway. It has been taken over, if you will, by the residents over there that enjoy. I think it's a nice trail. I think they enjoy it. So there are portions of it that aren't, but on the eastern end, it's very accessible, populated, and used. So what was our job? Was to perform a level 1 environmental site assessment to try to get as smart as we could about environmental issues that might exist that might be obvious. So we did, as part of a traditional phase 1 environmental site assessment, which has a standard. That's not what we did here, but that we use that as a guide, and that includes a record search, and we'll talk a lot about that. It includes interviewing people that are familiar with the site, and it includes some sort of a site visit to see what's out there, field observations, these sorts of things. So we performed those, looking for obvious signs of contamination that would warrant a response. What is out there that requires us to do something, or that would cause us to make a phone call, to react, to have a cleanup sort of issue where we would want to involve the EPA or a regulatory agency. So we also, as we said we would do, we wanted to document our field observations. That's what we'll do here quickly in writing subsequent after we'll talk a little about this and compile it. We did identify some structures, recognizable maintenance items. We got beyond the environmental issue and looked a little bit about, what does this mean to you? If you're in charge of this, what sorts of things are you going to be experiencing? What is the physical condition of the railway? What's going to become your problem? Sorts of things. And looking at common points of access in compiling what we call a limited property conditions assessment. So with that said, kind of get into those 3 pieces. It's hard to see some of these pictures, but I should probably see. Actually, I am going to go back and I put that here for a reason. It's a little hard to see, but this is down near Middle Grove. We were out there after some of that big snow melt, and it looks like a little culvert underneath the railroad bed there, the embankment, if you will. But one of the reasons I took that picture is I got down in there and I don't see a sheen on that water. I didn't see odor. I didn't see a bubbling tar. It was snow melt, and it was sitting next to the rail line with recent snow melt, and it was water.
Just standing water?
Just standing water.
Does it flow down further?
Ish. There are lots and lots of places where they're crushed, they're clogged. There's a lot of standing water after a big snow melt like that. But yeah, that was dribbling out and going downstream. But I was looking for opportunities for sheens, odors. A lot of the words that we use in these are, recognize environmental conditions. Is there a visible odor? Are there areas of stressed vegetation? Do we see, stained soils? Do we have odors that we've experienced? And I did not see that. Well, frankly, I'd let the cat out of the bag anywhere. But that was the reason I took that particular picture. And this one here you'll recognize is here in Hannah City, and your rail yard, your materials yard, which used to be a siding. So that's the land use now. Again, it's where you store materials, but I don't see a buried rail car there. I don't see gasoline bubbling up. I don't see evidence of fill pipes. That's got 140 years of history, but it's functioning just fine as a material storage area, and there's no reason to suspect any environmental cleanup is required at that point right now. The database search, what that does is there's a third-party vendor, the name of the firm is EDR, and they make money by performing government database searches, compiling and providing them to people who do this kind of work. And there are ASTM standards for this thing that require them to look at a whole bunch of databases at different radii, from 1/8 of a mile to a mile from the project corridor for us, not a site. ASTM, American Standard Testing, American Society of Testing Materials. Yes. And so it's a standard that's out there that helps us understand how close is close, what radius do we look at? And there are a lot of databases. I think I might have mentioned last time, one of the things that was flagged, again, 97 sites were identified within the corridor and the radii that are searched. And one of them is a Department of Defense site. That is your old Hannah City Homes, or your new Hannah City Homes, the old naval housing out there, because it was a Department of Defense site. And sure, it's flagged. Is that an environmental liability for you on the rail line? So these sorts of things that are part of this search. So again, 97 sites, and the punchline here, none were on the railroad itself. No sites, there are no records in databases ranging from Superfund sites to leaking underground storage tanks. RECRA is if you have like an auto mechanic and they have to register their materials. Those are RECRA sites. Those are just they just keep track of them. It doesn't mean it's leaking. It doesn't mean there's a problem. It's just you have to register for those. So there's a variety of sites, and there was a lot to go through there. And these 7 sites, are really the closest ones that we decided to make sure we kind of took a second look at because of their proximity to the railroad. And again, none of them were on the railroad itself. And we'll go through them real quick, and I'll look at pictures in the next one. There were 2 in Farmington, J&J Oil, and Caleb, that's the site right next to the old, what probably was a fueling or a siding there on South, is it Main? Yeah,
South
Main
Main.
Street.
Yeah, it's not owned by Lozier
Lozier
Oil.
Oil owns it now,
Yeah.
What is the siding, just from my?
Just where it comes off, there's the main line, and there's a parallel track that
yeah.
comes
That's
out.
where they pull the train cars
Just
on.
a side track.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
And sometimes there can be multiple. Think of a rail yard, you have 3 or 4 of them. And so we can see generally where those are at, and it makes sense. They're in the communities. Whether they were getting water or fuel or unloading people, livestock, fertilizer, you see these sorts of things. So that one there in Farmington it's an active fueling facility. It has all kinds of flags because that's their job. They store and transfer fuel. There were no leaks or contamination noted there. And if there was, is that something that would be your liability? That for a question, it's an adjacent site. It's not on your site. Similarly, up on Fort Street, and we'll look at the map, there's another site in Farmington, but they have what they call a no further remediation letter. It means they've gone through the process with the EPA. They've cleaned up what they needed to clean up. They have the letter they can wave around that says, we had an environmental issue, but we've addressed it to the EPA's satisfaction. So that NFR letter is a big thing when these things happen. You have several sites here in Hannah City. Have an auto body there. Pekin Lane? No, yes. I have to look at the map.
Yeah.
But that is has a recro site, so they essentially are the register. They probably have used oil. So when you do that and you store that on site, you need to register. So you're in the database. Doesn't mean there's a problem, but again, it was a flag close to the line, so we wanted to investigate that. The 2 gas stations here in town, those seems like we've been dealing with forever and ever, but they were out drilling. Was it last week or the week before? They did some work?
Yes.
Yeah. So they continue to work on that. Those are private site, old gas stations that are up along Main Street or Farmington Road here. So 4 blocks from the railroad? Again, everything's flowing north. We know from that work anyway. But here are some sites that are adjacent to your property that have environmental issues that are not likely to be causing them on the rail line itself, and not really your problem to clean up, whether you owned it or not. So the other one, the galvanizing site, I can't remember the name of it now.
AZZ.
Rome, but I don't know what it is.
AZZ.
Well, that's what it shows up here, but it's not the name of the site. What was it?
Well, it used to be Rome.
Oh,
They made those towers, but now,
Precision, is that right? I can't remember.
well, there's precision painting is part of it.
Okay.
They've got part of it. They're still doing some galvanizing towers. They're building towers there still.
So it's the middle picture at the bottom there. They're across from the jail, where the industrial facility is at. There's a lot going on there, and they have a lot of things that the EPA have been working with them on over the years. They have a pile of NFR letters and for the work that they've done, cleanup work that they've done, and they continue to be an active site. So again, it's an adjacent property that actually used to be part of the railroad, probably the biggest siding where trains were stored and probably were fueled. That was the site that I thought going into this would be the most interesting, and I think it probably continues to be. And then Altorf around the corner is a very active industrial facility. There were lots and lots of hits there, and that's south of the rail line itself. So
What were the hits there for? Was there a generator? Fuel?
and some of this stuff is historic too. I don't know what they've done in the past is the same as what they do now.
No, that used to be Faber, the guy that invented the telescoping hydraulic cylinder, like in the bed of trucks. That was their manufacturing facility. And then when they closed up shop, they shut down operations completely. They didn't sell out, and they sold to Altorf to use the building. So before that, it was manufacturing. Yeah.
So the database searches by distance, by geography. So that one shows up a lot. So, when we do the database search, we can go into these in detail, but really, we didn't find anything on the site. When we went out there and looked, again, we can stand here in Hannah City and look towards the gas stations and say, all right, as those gas stations impacting this rail line, well, they're not from where I'm standing. And those, maybe it's a bad example, we do know from the work that they've been doing there that the flumes are heading north. That's why they were drilling on the other side of 116 2 weeks ago. So that's one part of this. The second part of it, again, with the history of this site, it's not as easy as maybe we would have liked to have been. To go find the person who has owned this and is more than willing to chat about the environmental history of the thing that they've owned. That's not something that was possible for us. So we spoke with the people up here. We believe to be people who knew as much as anybody about the history of the site and about the current condition. And the reason Roland has got an asterisk again when I put this together, we had not spoken with him. We have since we spoke with him, and it didn't change the answer. Really talking about people's history of this, and the questions that we ask are similar to what we would ask in phase one. Is do you have any knowledge of buried tanks, of buried fuel, of contamination, of people finding things? For Jim, was nice to talk with him. When you've done work in town, when you've had a water main leak or run a sewer through this, did you experience leaks or fuel or smells when you worked near the rail line? And the answer unequivocally from everybody here was no. There was no knowledge of something that had happened. There was knowledge of the history, but not, again, knowledge of a contaminant. And what we're looking at here is over there on Trevoli, it's got a different name too on the maps, but where Amy had identified a drainage issue, which is different. We'll talk about that. But there is an activity here. It's grain. It probably at one time may have been fuel. There's again active work going on there. There's somebody's painted a white line there for some reason. They're using that rail bed. But again, when I look at that, do I see active contamination? No. There was a puddle because it doesn't drain. But and then Caleb, I think some of the conversation with you, it was interesting. The picture to the lower left is from just Google Earth. But if you zoom in a little bit, and it's hard to tell, that's the siding that went north to the middle. What was it called? Mid something. Midland. That's it. Midland. Yeah. And so it's kind of between Trevoli and Farmington. Yeah. And it just used to go up. But the thing is, it's not in the 90s. The aerials from the 90s. It's not in the aerials from the 30s. It was 60s and 70s. Yeah. Yep. And so when you look, and there it is. There's the old, and they're farming right through it. But there's an old rail bed there, and it's all owned by private property now.
When it was one strip mine, and then when that was done, it got pulled out.
Exactly.
That was it.
Yep. And there are a couple of places where that has happened if you look at the old maps. And again, I want to be clear that has gone into private property now. So really quickly, when we walked the line, and we didn't walk every inch of it, we walked where we could. We walked to sites we knew we needed to see. And we tried to walk the parts really on the eastern end that are much more accessible, that would probably be more active. But the picture in the upper right, you might just see it clearer on the paper ones, but over in Middle Grove, it's garbage. It's not contamination, but there are barrels everywhere. They're rusted. They're broken. Upper left, did I say right? Yes. Oh, sorry. There's a lot of litter and trash and stuff out in the woods. Lighting signals, boxes of stuff. So again, I get in there, I look, do I see big patch of dead vegetation and oil bubbling to the surface? Nope. We did not see that. It's litter that would be addressed when if construction ever occurred at the far western end of this thing. There's a picture down at the lower left that, again, I tried to look at the water that's ponded next to the rusted barrel that's probably been there for 40 years unmolested. And I did not see anything there. One of the things, if we were to have a reason to, we would go drill holes and dig into this thing and see what's underneath. Well, some animal already did. And so when we walked by, I got down there and looked at it, and it's railroad bed. It's the base over there was, and I don't know the term for it, it's the old slag. Mm-hmm. Whereas you get farther down the road, or down here to the eastern end, it's quartz, it's rock. But down there, it seemed to be more coal slag. So we took a sample of that and looked for trouble, we might find it because that's what they use as a rail bed there. But the animals don't seem to be impacted too much. It wasn't smoke coming out or odors or a tank that I witnessed. I didn't see fuel spilling into a farmer's yard or anything like that. It was just an opportunity to see what a hole looked like. This is the site in Farmington. You say it was Lozier. So there it is, looking to the west from Main Street. You can't see it very well, but there's several storage tanks they have there. They're operating a facility. Again, we walked the line there, and there's a lot of litter along this thing in the city of Farmington. But again, I don't want to equate garbage with an environmental contamination. Another site there, I think that's Kramer, where there's a fuel tank behind a barn there, right next to the rail line. Whether it's registered or not, I don't recall. But again, is it leaking? Is it impacting your rail line? No. They're not from a surface observation. One of the sites we walked down along here, there's again a lot of litter. When they took things up, I think sometimes they just either left something or didn't get it or didn't want it. But there's boxes that look like maybe electrical boxes for signals that have water in them because they're open topped and it rains and snows. So we looked in there and there's water in a box. And the water did not have a sheen on it. It wasn't obviously a tank full of fuel. It was water in a box. It's litter. To the eastern end, there's a lot of utility activity. As you might imagine, GPSD has a sewer that crosses this thing about 4 times, maybe more, when you go down the hill from Maxwell Road. There's a lot more pipes. There's a lot of things crossing the rail bed in that area. Most of them appear abandoned. I don't know if they were associated with the rail yard or with the utilities or with the activities of the various land uses through there. None of them looked active. They were pretty bad shape. Again, someone could spend a lot of time trying to document and inventory all of those, but they're not hurting anything right now from an inspection from a visual inspection from the surface. So if I was to what is the worst bits of environmental issues, if you will, that I saw, it would be on this slide. Adjacent land uses, a lot of garbage, a lot of litter, some pipes that cross the facility. I did not witness anything that, again, I would call the EPA on having done that. 2 more. So maintenance, we wanted to do separately. And I want to be clear again, I know sometimes it blurs, but there's an environmental liability where you would have to be obligated to clean something up. And then there's maintenance and upkeep and making sure this thing is a safe place for people to be on, whether they should be or not, or ultimately to make it usable as a trail. And that's a different question. So what I'm showing here along some sites is over in Newell Grove, boy, I tell you, we weren't 5 steps into the thing, and that's a well. Who knows? And so someday, should that need to be abandoned, that would be something that would need to be done. We've been there before out at the work camp. So it's not an environmental liability, but it is something that there's, again, structure. It's something that would need to be addressed at some day.
It's a well on the rail bed? Really?
It's right. Well, it's right next to it. But trains can go through it, but it's right next to it. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Is it open? I mean, can that?
It's got you can't see it very well. I can try it on my computer, but no, it's got the line shaft pump on it. So the turbine's been pulled off, but the pump housing itself is still there. So nobody could fall in it. No, it's got a shaft in it.
And it looked like a casing going out through the ground?
Mm-hmm. Or a cistern or something. Yeah. Again, it more than likely water. For safety reasons, we didn't go popping any lids off, but still be out there. And what you can't see very well, and I could show you pages and pages and pages of pictures of tires. There are a lot of tires on that rail line. It's a fun place to dump because it's convenient. There's a lot of places to access it. Some places you can get a car down a little ways, dump, go. There's a lot of junk and tires. That one there is just west of Farmington. The lower left picture, it's a little difficult to see, but I thought that was interesting. I wanted to show that somebody has taken those concrete Jersey barriers,
K-rails.
is that what they call them? And just all the way across, and can't get an ATV through there. So they've taken ownership of that area, but is that an option if you want to keep people off of this thing? That's what somebody has elected to use, and it seems to be pretty effective there. I like the no trespassing signs on the thing too. That's what makes me. But, you'll see, and there was another in Farmington. That was one of the structures. That's more. I tried to show some of the larger structures there at the bottom. The second and fourth picture from the left on the bottom are two of the larger wooden structures that are out there. These aren't, don't think Rocky Mountains, Glen Canyon. These are small wooden trellises that go over a ditch. We did not walk over them, again, for safety reasons. I'm sure people trestles. I'm sure people drive ATVs over them all the time. Brian, you may know better than I about the structural integrity of that wooden bridge back there. I was wondering, not having gone out there as we've been talking about it, is there something where somebody would be zipping along on an ATV and then woo, fall into and I don't think really there is. We didn't see any. Even some of those sites in the middle one there's a culvert that's kind of collapsed a little bit, so there's a dip. But it's probably fun. It's not fall off the thing, and fall 50 feet into the creek. There were none of those that we saw anyway.
There's one visible from the highway out west of Farmington. I think there's just two beams that go across right now.
And that's the one that we're not able to get to because it's inaccessible this way, and we elected not to trespass.
Yeah.
So probably, I kind of regretted it, but then I didn't. They've got a lot of no trespassing signs.
Yeah.
So we elected not to.
Yeah.
We know that's back there.
Yeah, it's the biggest one on there probably, and I think now it's just reduced to two beams that go across. Which, according to the landowner, I think he said people had actually driven across it in that condition, which is
right.
Yeah,
that one's pretty inaccessible.
It is,
which is probably good.
And he's talked about. I mean, the landowner even talked about going out there with a torch and just zipping them off and letting them just to make it so nobody even tries to walk across it, just because he was afraid he'd walk back there someday and find somebody.
I've got myself out there.
Yeah.
Across the top there, you can see one large washout area where it's just washed out. So some that one, again, you're falling 8 feet, but it's still you would notice. And then under Maxwell Road, there's a fair amount of erosion. So there's a lot of erosion. One picture that I did skip there in the middle one, the third one here, I was in Farmington. It made me laugh because I deal with this on the other side, but I'm standing there looking at this pipe sticking out of the ground right into the railway. And I'm thinking, all of a sudden it just turns on. It's somebody's sump pump. Can't put it in the sewer, put it on the railway, which is, I can't blame them. So there's a lot of that where people are taking advantage of this out behind their fence. There's a lot of dumping in Farmington where that's just a place to throw the Christmas tree over the fence, back on the rail line that nobody knows about. So there's a fair amount of that. There's one of the larger structures down there towards Kickapoo Creek Road. And again, maybe one of the larger washouts there towards Maxwell Road at the far eastern end. You can see they're going around it on their ATVs, but that was one that would caught my attention. And at the far end, where it hits Kickapoo Creek Road again, there's this nice trail that goes into the woods that a pickup truck goes in very well, and there's a lot of tires back there. It's just an opportunity to dump back in there. So. There it is from the other side. So you can see there's wood and there's tires up along the left and behind me there. So I went really quickly, and I kind of want to summarize it here.
What is this other? Top right.
I think it was Kickapoo.
I just wanted to show one of the larger culverts. That didn't show up on the Tri-County map. That's I believe a 10 by 10 box. There,
Pretty big stuff.
there are 2 or 3 of them out there. That's a fairly large tributary to Kickapoo Creek. It kind of crosses underneath it a couple times. It's very very cut through there. There's a lot of very steep slopes. But yeah, there are several of those. And we can look at some pictures that some of the corrugated metal ones are not as in good condition. There's some erosion issues down on the eastern end of this thing. That would require some fill.
But these culverts are IDOT? No?
They're the railroads.
Probably. There might be some wildcatted ones.
Yeah,
there,
I wonder about the utilities, that's for sure.
I don't know. Judging by what you see here in the list of licenses, just looking at the sheet that was there, can't imagine there's one license for everything
Yeah, it ultimately would be interesting. Now, again, down on the east end, a lot of telephone, GPSD. There's manholes everywhere throughout Farmington. There are manholes across this. Their wastewater treatment plant isn't far away. It runs right along. It's a good spot to run it. It follows the creek bed, and that's why sewers follow the creek bed. It is an active location to the eastern end. So I wanted to summarize as quickly as I could. This has been there for 140 years. It's been a rail line serving a coal mine for 140 years. So it has a history. The database search did not identify any activities or releases on the railroad property itself. We spoke with some of the folks who, as best we can, know about the condition, at least current condition of the railroad property, and did not identify any known areas of existing contamination on the property. UP did provide a small report showing they tested the ballast and found no contaminants. Thank you. We did review some aerials, and I've got all that stuff, and I can provide. It's pretty interesting to look at the old aerials. We spliced them all together. One from 39. There's a lot of them. They don't cover the whole thing. 39, 46, 56, 60s, 70s. It's pretty interesting stuff to see. It's also interesting. It's really hard to find where you're at in the world in 1939 when you don't have interstates or
landmarks.
Yeah, there's no landmarks.
When you look
really
at those old ones on the geospatial clearinghouse, sometimes you're really
it's
Following creek beds.
Yep,
Saying,
exactly.
okay, I know where this goes.
Yep, it's hard to find something but nothing there. Again, there's a rail line, and some of them have sidings. One of them serves a coal mine. Our site reconnaissance identified remnants of lots of junk, remnants of materials, utilities. There are pipes in some areas, but no active contamination that would require response.
When you say pipes, all those are going under it, or they're going up?
Some of them are just laying there that they've ripped up, and they're just laying on the ground. Some of them we pick up and see if they're connected to something. Some of them do go through, whether it's a sanitary sewer or an old.
But they all pretty much looked abandoned.
Some of I would say that the ones that were exposed looked abandoned. I didn't see anything, obviously pumping fuel. I wouldn't know where some of them would go. But yeah, they're out there. And it would be interesting to see if those licenses were geo-referenced, for lack of a better term, if they lined up with some of those so you could identify an owner. But honestly, when the day came that it was time to develop a trail in that location, as the contractor was going through there, depending on the funding source, you would address it. You would pull it out of the ground and dispose of it properly so it didn't cause, any impacts to the users, and you move on with your life. I wouldn't, and if it's not hurting anybody now, and you're not addressing that portion of the trail, I would leave it until such time that it was time to address it. So I wanted to comment, and Brian, I think we can switch back now because I got some stuff down there. The findings that we found were consistent with other Rails to Trails projects. And I have a resource here that I can make available to you electronically or pass this around. There's probably a lot more to review than we have time, but it was produced in 2004 from a Rails to Trails Conservancy. Janet, did I get this from you? I don't know where I got this.
Which document are you reading?
You cut out the first part. Try one more time.
What document is that you're looking at?
It says, Understanding Environmental Contaminants, Lessons Learned and Guidance to Keep Your Rail to Trail Project on Track.
Okay.
Did I get it from you?
I don't think so.
Where I got this?
This Rail Conservancy group is a federal group that is they're not in charge of, but they oversee a lot of abandoned railroads that have been made into hiking and biking trails. That kind of go along with the interim trail use, the NITA or NITU, National Interim Trail Use. But they're a wealth of information and have been dealing with turning railroads into hiking and biking trails for years.
Yeah, they're a clearinghouse, and I think what they were trying to do was answer this complicated question of what level of environmental risk is out there. So it's again for 2004, so it's a little bit dated, but it says there's been 13,000 miles of rail to trails in the United States at that time. And what they did is they sent out surveys to 715 of these projects that have happened throughout the country. And they got back about 112 of them. So 20%, which I probably fair for a few railroads. But what they found, and I'll just quote, it says, the survey shows that most rail trail developers and managers followed some sort of due diligence and finding nothing continued with development to one degree or another. So they got back 74 responses. Things people dug, I shouldn't say to use that word, inquired, performed due diligence levels all the way from sampling to assuming that there was nothing there. Only either here or there. So the vast majority of them either performed a phase one or a visual inspection. Sampling was rare, and they moved on. And there, you can go through all this, but just some examples. Did not test trailside vegetation, indicated that contamination is not a problem. No testing, we're not concerned. Investigation found 2 underground fuel tanks. They were reported, removed at $15,000, and the railroad paid for it. I know that's maybe not your opportunity here. The things that are concerned that they found are asbestos, or not asbestos, arsenic from the pesticides that they used to use to knock back vegetation, creosote from the ties, which I should have mentioned are all gone. They removed the ties and they didn't bury them, to our knowledge. And people we spoke with, I didn't see any evidence of widespread burying. Every once in a while, there's a piece or one laying on the side, but we didn't see piles of mounds of what were buried ties. They're soaked in creosote. So is there an opportunity to find low levels of creosote if you go looking for it? Probably. Arsenic and creosote were the biggest ones. But what they were looking for, some of these folks in this, are derailments, buried tankers, known impacts from activities. There's 2 different kinds, they said, on the trail or adjacent to the trail. And so we looked at some of the similar things here. Land uses adjacent to the trail, sites like the one in Farmington. Are there activities there that are creating known environmental conditions that need to be addressed today on that trail? We didn't see any. The database didn't know of any. Talking with folks in Farmington, they're unaware of any. So this is an interesting document, and it really ties into, I think, maybe, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about the gentleman from, sorry,
Madison County.
This is, there's something with a history. You are intending to someday go and perhaps pave over the top, maybe remove a little bit of soil just for, structural purposes to have a path to walk on. But the exposure routes, I think that was the last bit I had there, is, whatever exposure routes exist today for anything that might be out there, there's not an anticipation that a proposed use would change that in any way. Again, you're going to drill wells and feed them to kindergartners. It's a path that would not create additional pathways or exposure routes that we know of at this time. So, go ahead.
Well, I just came to kind of listen tonight to see what you were going to do. I've met with the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, asked me to give them an update on the trail at their last PUATS meeting, and so I went. And, there were representatives from all of the different counties there, the 4 different counties that PUATS encompasses. They were all very supportive of this project. I also have been in contact with other communities that have done the rails to trails and asking them specifically about liability issues and how they dealt with them and have they had any problems with them. And I got a real nice email back. I don't know, Brian, if you shared that email.
I did not.
This is from the Madison County Transit Authority, which is down just north of the St. Louis area. But they have a lot of, 125 miles of former rail corridors, most of which they have converted into trails. some, just reading from his email to me, some segments of the alignment, both rail banked and non-rail banked, sit idle, much like what I would describe to them what we have up here. Those idle alignments have not posed any significant issues at all. There have been some cases where we encountered illegal dumping, which Brandon indicated there's dumping along there. But blocking access curb cured a lot of those issues. We also have acquired old abandoned rail corridors that have had the railroad bridges removed, but we installed chain link fencing near the bridge abutments and signed it much like you intend to do. Like some of the pictures you saw with the holes in the slats of the trestles going through there. So they just, until they have the money to develop it, they just put up a chain link fence around it and say, hey, keep out, don't use it. Nothing a municipality does or will do will be free from potential liability, but that shouldn't stop it from providing public service. Your attorney may want to point out that the Illinois Tort Immunity Act provides a certain level of protection for the village that it may not be aware of. Madison County Trail Transit Authority included its trails and corridors under its umbrella insurance coverage and has owned rail corridors for over 20 years. Knock on wood, we've never paid a claim arising out of its ownership of such property. Phase 1 is also always a good recommendation, which we had done for any property a unit of government will acquire, even if it's a donation. Nothing in government does is risk-free. I hope the fear of potential liability doesn't stop your efforts. I can tell you this with some certainty: if a similar piece of property would be available in Madison or its neighboring counties, it would be snapped up in short order. The MCT, Madison County Trail Transit trails have become the envy of the region, and the trails sit on the foundation of former rail corridors. If MCT didn't acquire its rail corridors when they did, none of the trails would exist today. So, this is a guy who's been involved in it for, he's been with the Madison County Transit for 35 years, and for more than 20 years, they started changing the abandoned railroads into hiking and biking trails in that area. It's one of the premier trails in Illinois. That's why I reached out to him. I was trying to get some information on some other things from him and asked him about these questions of liability. There's another one up in the Pecatonica area, Freeport, up in that area. They've experienced the same thing. So just giving you some information of what I've come up with in working on this and trying to figure out whether or not this is a good project for the village of Kansas City to proceed on. I think it is. I'll let Janicki talk on some of the legal liability issues.
And while she's gearing up, and that would be and like I said, that would be the final point here. Is I think this is consistent with the sort of thing we see when we did our limited investigation. We saw what we expected to be consistent with the railroad of this age and this land use, and similar models of rails to trails in similar areas. So, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them and then turn it over.
The only thing I would add is I called the IMLR liability company. Brian had asked me to do that, and they said that they confirmed that the cost to add this would be very limited in terms of what they did. They also confirmed that they've done public type park projects like this, not exactly like this, but they said that the number of claims you get are limited. So they didn't feel like that there was a huge liability. I didn't get any impression that they were concerned. They did, that with one caveat, they did say, that this is a little unique because you've got 25 miles and parts of it are way away from the village. So that was one caveat. He was going to check with their loss control people and give us some ideas of what we could do to help manage that. His biggest thing was if you're going to have costs, it'll come out of new costs. It'll come out of claims. So if somebody claims something and then you have to do something to deal with that, then your insurance costs are going to go up. But his position was that he didn't feel like that there would be a majority based upon his or a lot of claims based upon his experience. And we have $8 million per incident coverage. So if something bad did happen per incident, we've got $8 million worth of liability coverage. Yeah. Any questions for Brandon? Any questions, thoughts on liability?
I just have one for anybody that can answer it. If we buy this, how long do we have before we actually have to develop it? Or do we have to immediately go out and do stuff? Or do we need to post signs immediately?
I think the only thing that we're required to do is post a sign.
Well, as far the development of the trail will take years. It's not something that we're going to be able to do right away. For liability reasons, we should and will post signs, and in areas where there are dangerous situations like the bridges and stuff, I would recommend that we put some sort of barrier up to try to keep somebody from walking over it. The only thing that we have to do is put signs up saying this is a natural trail. So walk at your own risk. Basically, it's not an improved trail. You know, we don't have lighting. We don't have, it's not a hard packed surface. This is a natural trail, just like you would be walking through a trail at any state park or whatever. That's all we have to do to comply with the National Interim Trail Use agreements that we're signing on this trail. We have to show that we are making it into a trail. So putting it up saying it's a natural trail, that's all we have to do to begin with.
I mean, I think with something with the agreement, we had to put something up saying it was that what it was? Is
It
those
was the
signs
DNR.
Yes.
or something? I
It was
thought there was.
paid. You have to. One of the stipulations of the grant was they had to erect a sign that said it was paid for with grant money.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say there's the grant requirements and then the sort of liability prevention requirement, which Fred highlighted, maybe blocking off some of the bridges and whatnot.
And I think the loss control people with our current insurance company are going to get back with me on ideas and thoughts that they would have that they would think would make sense too. So we might get some direction.
Yeah. Yep.
Anything else on those topics before we move on to an update on the extension?
I would ask, I don't know when you were going to talk about this, but with the estimated trail cost that Brandon had sent around, just some feedback he'd received from within his firm about the sort of average cost per mile.
Yeah, I got it as letter D, but we can go there now if you want.
Either way, it sort of goes to this question about those costs up front, and it sort of does touch on the maintenance obligations, which would be sort of the initial upfront obligation. So however you want to do it.
Well, if I'm reading this correctly, what they're saying is, I don't know, the weighted average is an estimated $2,000 per mile for routine maintenance activities.
Correct.
So,
That's for a developed mile or just an as-is right now mile?
Developed. Once it's up and running, now I'm not sure that it matters if it's gravel or HMA asphalt. You can look at where those come from. Yearly evaluations, removing encroaching vegetation. It's not construction. It's once you've got a trail that's functioning, keeping it that way.
But again, we don't have to do any of this right away.
No, correct.
there would be signage.
Other than the signage,
Right.
is
So
a legal obligation we need to do
this is
and
the
get
part
posted,
here's-
in certain areas of no trespassing and things like that.
I know we're a ways off, but is there an initial idea of what stretch would be developed first?
Well, that would, if the village votes tonight to move forward, what we would do then is basically let the other partners know that we are moving forward with it. A lot depends on the STB, whether or not we get the extension. If we can get it all completed we're under the STB's deadline of March 30th. As far as I know, and Janica, you can give me an update on that. I don't know if we've gotten in our hearing yet on that or an extension on that. I have not seen anything on their website.
That's right.
But
So just to put a fine point on that, we don't have another meeting. Now, obviously, we can schedule an emergency meeting if we need to. But we don't have another meeting before the end of March, so the deadline will come and go. So at this meeting, with no extension, we either need to decide that we're going to move forward without an extension, or we're going to roll the dice and see if the extension comes. Is that fair?
It sounds as though the question is, do you proceed without the extension or do you wait to see what happens?
Correct. One option is rolling the dice, knowing that it could all die if we don't do anything. The other option is we vote to proceed and move forward, even though we don't have the extension and our due diligence is probably 90% complete. There's one step that we don't have done, which is the Caleb, the process of looking at all the encumbrances and those types of things. And I don't know how important that is.
That's a major step. So that's a step, and obviously we still don't have all of the licenses from UP. They're still working on getting them together for us. So that's a fairly serious thing that needs to be looked at. And then the other point is,
can you explain why you're saying that that's serious so everybody understands?
yes. Okay. So there's sort of two phases to what we're asking Caleb to give us an estimate for, to give us a proposal for. One is just lining up the pieces of the trail, the pins, the descriptions, if you will, and making sure that they actually do line up and that there would be a through line. That's part of what we've asked him to do. The other part of it is going to be taking the various rights of way, licenses, crossing agreements, and so on that UP has provided and seeing where they are and making sure that they don't obstruct the trail to the point where it's unusable or it creates a split in the trail. We've got some, I think, hopefully most, at least half, let's say, of those licenses from UP, but they're still working on getting the rest of them together. So that's sort of a work in process. So we've got that to do. The other thing that would need to happen before closing is we've had discussions with Farmington. It's our only remaining partner because for ongoing maintenance. Obviously, the county is still in for the acquisition piece, but they're not in for ongoing maintenance and operations costs or liability. So Farmington, it sounds like, is in. It's not clear what they think the scope of their commitment would be. Whether they think that commitment is still the sort of 20-some% of the whole project. So Hannah City's picking up the county's portion, or whether we're now splitting just sort of 50-50 between Hannah City and Farmington. Obviously, that makes a pretty big difference to Hannah City, 50% versus 75, let's say.
Yeah,
so that's a conversation that needs to happen.
I can't remember, maybe it was somebody in this room, but somebody told me that they saw in the paper, maybe it was minutes from their meeting, that Farmington's perception was that we would be picking up Peoria County's piece of the ongoing maintenance and that they would only be responsible for what they currently have. I don't remember who told me that.
Yeah, there was a newspaper article.
they had a council meeting last Monday night, and it was discussed at their council meeting. And, the big question is, if we move forward, what is this going to cost us in the future as we move forward? And, the mayor, Kent Kowal, indicated that we don't have those numbers yet. We don't even know whether we're moving forward with this project yet or not. But he estimated that what the city of Farmington would be willing to pursue in the future would be around $10,000 a year to assist with the development and maintenance of the trail. So that I think as we move forward, I think, will they do more in the future? I don't know.
How many miles does it go through Farmington?
It's about the same as what goes through Hannah City. Within the village limits or the city limits of Farmington, it's probably a mile and a half. And then when we figured out the percentages, we went a mile and a half on both sides, east side and west side of Hannah City, and then the mile or so, mile and a half through Hannah City. So that's the portion that we were based the purchase agreement off of.
Yeah, Farmington.
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry. In the purchase agreement, the acquisition part of the intergovernmental agreement, they had 26.87% was Farmington.
What was Peoria County?
Peoria County was 45.87.
So can we just put the Peoria side up? Say no access.
Well, and you know, that's the thing as we talk about maintenance and developing going forward. There are going to be costs. I mean, there's no doubt that there's going to be costs. What we hope to do is form this commission that would oversee fundraising and a private partnership with us to get money to help offset the costs to Hannah City, basically, because I look at it as basically this is Hannah City's project. Farmington may chip in $10,000 a year to help us, but this is basically Hannah City's project. With Peoria County sending us a letter saying, hey, they'll help with the purchase of it, but they're not going to help with the maintenance and moving forward with it. That basically tells me that because Hannah City was the one who applied for the grant, it's our baby. And so my feeling is Hannah City's not going to be able to do it on their own. So we've already lined up a not-for-profit that is going to help us with raising money to help with the development and maintenance of this. And that's where I really think the money's going to come from. I think if Hannah City and Farmington both chip in about $10,000 a year, I think with that as our seed money, because with grants, there's always an 80-20 match. So we use that money to match grants that we can get. And there are some people who are really wanting to see trails in this area that will donate money to this project.
And we're setting some aside right now, right?
$1,000 a month.
Yeah, we're
But that was predominantly for the purchase. We've got 150,000, something like that. I'll show you that under the budget. And that might be a good discussion to have, is to look at the budget so you've got context of where we're putting money and so forth later. That may make sense. But yeah, it's about $1,000 a month is what we're currently setting aside for.
But that money, since we have the grant for the purchase,
I think we've got enough money for the grant for the purchase. So all that $1,000 we're putting a month away now would be for some of these additional costs, perhaps that we have if they're not covered by the grant, and or as we move into the acquisition and maintenance.
With the grant, we still have to come up with 20%. It's a $2.1 million grant is what we applied for. That works out to 160. I didn't bring my paperwork with me. 164,000 or something. 166,000 we're getting from the grant. Farmington, Peoria County, and Hannah City are coming up with the other 400,000 to make the 2.1 million. So Hannah City's portion of it was 111,000, I think, which still leaves us
Hannah
about,
City is, at least based on the original intergovernmental agreement for acquisition, Hannah City is 113,483.
113.
And we're sitting somewhere around 150 now in there, plus the 1,000 a month we're continuing to put aside.
Great.
So there's money for us to pay our 20% at with about 20 to 30,000 left over
For signage. and
to
things.
signage and to help get it started.
We were already acquiring fees, though. I mean, there's not 30,000 left over because we've already spent.
Yeah, we
Right.
spent 16,000 on the environmental, and we've got some legal fees and stuff here.
Yeah.
Which
And some of that is going to come out of that 20%.
potentially, yeah.
Potentially, because that's all considered part of the purchase of the property.
I have a stupid question. Do we have to pay taxes on that property?
Public
Okay.
property.
Hmm?
It's public property, just like Village
Okay.
Hall. Yeah.
I guess I'd like to hear maybe from Brandon and Caleb on this right-of-way issue. And whether or not you see it. I guess I'm just looking for your.
Well, the right of way is going to be. It's not going to be going out in the field and doing anything. It's going to be a basic look. You know, does this piece of property go from this road to this section line? Does the next railroad document start at that section line and move on? Did they not leave a gap? But since it's still a railroad, I think they're guaranteed to have continuity anyway, since it's rail bank. So
Yes.
that won't be as big of an issue, probably. And the way railroads are usually described, I doubt they left anything out. They're usually so general that they can't leave anything out. The licenses, which we don't even have all of them yet, I guarantee they're a mess. Because railroads rarely do easements. They usually do licenses because they're to an individual entity or person. They don't travel with the property like an easement does, so the railroad can limit them whenever they need to. I'm sure most of those people are dead that were granted some of the early ones. I'm sure there's stuff across there that's been, put wildcatted across that didn't have a license. And probably some things that were under license but have been sold 20 times. They've never updated the license for the current owner. And there's probably a few cases where the current license is what goes on. Like GPSD probably has current licenses for what they have.
Yeah, and I don't know if you looked at them, but a number of them are only barely legible too, because they're so old.
I haven't even
So
seen
that-
half the list, but yeah, I'm sure from 1882 on, there's probably licenses. I think I saw a couple that were for cattle crossings that, of course, now are, nobody's running cattle along there. We're aware of that needs to drive across the track. So, the fuck like that. But yeah, those will be, and who knows, newer licenses, sometimes they'll give you the mile marker or distance from a road crossing, something very easy that the railroad could have found themselves if they were out in the field. Somebody driving on a high wheel truck could have went to a railroad crossing through a odometer and driven and said, okay, this is what this crossing is. But the old ones like that, who knows how they described them. I haven't seen some of the real old ones. I've worked with some of the newer ones before, and they're, at least for road crossings, are easy. You can even look at Google Earth and say, okay, I'm going this many, there's a road, pipes and that'll be a total mystery sometimes. I mean, you're going to go to that area and there's somewhere in there is probably a pipe that's got a license on it.
And Brian, we did not look at any of that. Wasn't part of it. The only thing I've done is gone through the GIS, which I realize is of limited value, and tried to add up all the parcel numbers just to make sure we were on the right spot. I think there were only two places where it either didn't identify a parcel number or didn't identify an owner, but again, that's just the county GIS.
Yeah.
So today's the 15th. The chances of getting that work done before the 30th are
zero.
okay.
I mean, to go through all those licenses, we don't even have them all yet.
So then my next question is what comfort level would you guys have of us moving forward without having that work done?
Well, I think Janet mentioned earlier, I mean, since it's still a railroad, we're guaranteed continuity all the way through, correct?
Yes.
Well, technically, but I mean, if the railroad's given licenses or easements for that matter, or leases that effectively separate it, that's something, that would cause a problem if you did ever want to develop.
And they never have provided.
So yes, I mean, technically there's fee ownership whatever we want to call it, by the railroad all the way through. That doesn't necessarily mean you have possessory and use throughout. So there's some question.
Yeah.
But at least up until 1986, when the last train went through, there was continuity. So it would just be anything from 86 to present if the railroad gave an easement for some property owner to use that portion of the railroad. Because up until then, they were running trains across it.
That would be an assumption that we could make. I don't know that I would feel 100% comfortable making that assumption, because it might say, well, you have the use of the land except as if it interferes with rail use or something like that. In which case, you could have granted the rights beforehand, and then when the rail use stops, now it pertains to more of the property than it did, things like that. I don't know. I would be speculating. Again, I think what you're saying makes sense from a practical standpoint, but these railroads are not terribly practical in my experience. So
Some of it gets out of my purvey too. I mean, I know some of the old deeds east of Hannah City read, as long as rails, or what did it say? As long as cars roll along the rail, this is for, the real old ones from like the 1880s. There's a few of them. And so, that's your world, and that, how exactly that applies is,
But this gets back to our federal law on rail banking and the National Interim Trail Use Agreement.
Yeah. Their intent back then was being used by a railroad, and rail banking is still used by a railroad. So they didn't literally mean rails on there that, used by the railroads or cars on the rail. No.
And I will say that issue came up, and there was a lot of analysis in that federal court of claims case that I mentioned last time with the sort of eminent domain proceedings, where some landowners said, well, we reserved rights to our land because we only gave the property for rail use. And then it's the court coming in and saying, well, this counts as rail use, so sorry, you still don't have a right to your land.
Well, even though on this particular trail that had been supposedly bought out by the federal government, whatever was filed in opposition to this said that even though they receive money, they don't consider themselves compensated for the loss of their property, which.
Right. Well, and frankly, as I mentioned previously, I talked to the attorney for the Department of Justice who's defending that case, and he was very ambivalent about committing to a position about whether those people have to pay the money back or not if we don't get the trail use.
Yeah, exactly. So, the money for then that they were giving them, just pain and suffering for the fact it was used as a rail. I mean, that was confusing.
No, and frankly, it sounds as though that's a whole, there are treatises written about it. So I figured that was not within the scope of this engagement.
I guess the point was just that if we're going to vote to proceed tonight, I wanted to make sure the board understood that there's a risk here. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, but there's just a risk here that you need to weigh as you think about what you do.
How many structures need fenced along this thing? There's at least 4 or 5 bridges, but then
Probably 5, I would say,
that
I'm aware of.
Yeah, the rest, like some of that 10-foot culvert,
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've been on trails that was where they're bigger than the bridges that we're talking about fencing
Down there.
and a lot shadier. You're walking along with, a sign that says be careful.
Yeah, I would be much more interested in the part where we've lost the embankment, structure or not.
Yeah, exactly. So,
So, if I was to pick a number out of a hat to say how many times do we need to protect somebody from going, I would say 10.
So, like, put a 3-sided fence around the end of the bridge or something.
And I also wonder if you can provide that protection by limiting access at the crossing points. I think on the western half of this thing you can, because you can't get to the trail except a mile apart.
Yeah.
And if I've got a fence across there, I've got to go through a cornfield.
You'll never keep
the far eastern part,
in.
people have cul-de-sacs and there's all kinds of access.
And we're just concerned about vehicular access or ATV access or something. You're never going to keep somebody out on foot. Even fencing, it's not going to keep them,
So yeah, if you maybe pick a number, I would say, be prepared for 10 spots to go out there and try to do your best to keep somebody from falling into something.
Yeah.
Whether it's a structure or just flat out loss.
And as Brian pointed out, the insurance company is going to have something to say about that. So.
Yeah.
Yep. they'll help us with that.
Johnny, anything on the UP contract that we need to know? Anything new there?
Apropos of the UP contract, just trying to harass these people to get me the rest of the licenses. And I will double back to the STB extension update. Since our last meeting, as you know, we filed our motion for issuance of substitute Me-Too and motion for adjustment of the negotiation period back on February 22nd. Congressman LaHood filed a letter in support on March 1st. The IDNR finally filed their motion in support or letter in support on March 2nd. It's a little ambiguous what they filed because they sort of said we should get a substitute need to, but not really substitute additional. So they don't necessarily want to be off the paperwork. They want to be on it too, which was interesting. But anyway, they still were in support of this, and they were in support of an extension, actually a longer extension. They asked for a full year. We just asked for the rest of the calendar year. And then finally on March 10th, just last week, the Union Pacific finally filed their letter in support of our motion for substitute Me-Too and extension. As we discussed, the NARPO, the National Association of Reversionary Property Owners, actually filed their response in opposition to our motion the same day that we filed the motion, back on February 22nd. As far as I can tell, there's nothing preventing the STB from ruling at this point, since IDNR has weighed in and now UP has weighed in as of 5 days ago. So hopefully, I keep checking. Any minute now, we'll get something.
But they have until
And
They have till March
because
30th.
they can take until the 30th.
Yeah.
I guess our options are vote tonight, push out and have an emergency meeting right before the end of the month to see if we have an extension at that time.
If this starts up and goes 10 years and there's not been a finger lifted to develop any of it, is there an out ever for us in Farmington, and for us, I guess, since we would own it? I mean, if we have this and 10 years has gone by and this thing is still a decrepit railway and there's not been any development done on it because, hey, the city won't develop it. We'll never have the money to develop it. We're going to do basic maintenance to keep people from killing themselves on it and wait for the group to form to develop it. I mean, realistically, you're not going to pay for the miles.
Yeah, I'm going to defer a bit to Fred on this, but it's my understanding, and he's more knowledgeable about this than I am, that the way that the IDNR grant works, if we were to disclaim responsibility at some point for the line, there would be a process by which the IDNR would take it. Am I getting that right, Fred?
That's the way I read the grant.
Well, flush this out.
Yeah, we can pin that down, obviously. So
Yeah, it's because the grant runs through the state, through IDNR. And so if there is a default, then IDNR basically takes it over.
What's
So
the fine?
obviously that would be forfeiting the money that we put in, the 20%
Yes.
as for the county and Farmington. So
Right.
that's not an ideal solution.
Over.
But that's only if we decide, hey, we don't want it anymore. But even if we don't develop it for 20 years, portions of it, if only just, let's say we do between Taylor Road and Pekin Lane. If we do that part, we don't get to those other areas ever.
Yeah.
That's still ours. Until every time the village would say, hey, we don't want it anymore, we can't take care of it, then we would.
So we forfeit that money and the DNR takes it over and it's still rail banked,
Yes.
and then it's up to them how to dispose of it.
And well,
Right. Now we can't keep pieces of it.
they would have to keep it as the 24.7 mile corridor.
They would have to keep maintaining it as a trail.
Yes.
Same as us, or not, just keep it undeveloped.
Yeah, I wonder.
I can inquire. I'll talk to the attorney. She's actually quite responsive. So I'll check in with her tomorrow and see what she knows about how that process works, because I'm having trouble thinking of what we would do that would be a default. Once
Just
we've
saying
bought
that
it, we've kind of,
it's been 10 or 20 years and nothing has occurred on it, or we pay 500 feet of it through town for people to use, but nothing's going on. We're having to maintain the fences. We're having to put signage up all the time. You know, we're just
it turns out to be
losses
too
and
big a
walking.
headache.
Do what?
Yeah. If it turns out to be too big a headache and we're just really ready to bail, what can we? That's the
Yeah,
question.
I mean, we can't let it go for taxes, obviously, but I mean, the equivalent of just leaving the keys in and walking away. I mean, what is our out if it just goes down the tubes if we did proceed? That would be,
Yep.
my biggest thing.
Yeah, and my understanding is we can just bail at some point. Obviously, forfeiting all the 400,000 that we went in from local government, but I will confirm what that procedure looks like with.
Yeah, is that our decision alone since we own it? Or does the county of Farmington?
Grant County's not going to have a say. They already said they don't.
They want to do maintenance out.
I understand. I just want to make sure that that's true.
And it's similar to what Peoria County did to us back in 2015 when they received this grant the first time around.
Yeah.
It was their decision to make to give it back.
They had the money in hand.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, they didn't. We did.
Oh.
we had the money to pay the whole. At that time, it was going to be 10%. We were going to have to chalk up because the state had given us 10% grant money. The feds had given us 80. We just had to come up with 10%. Anna City had the 10% to buy it at that time. But since Peoria County had filed for the grant, we had no say. They ended up just turning it back in.
Because they didn't have the money set aside.
They didn't have the money set aside to move forward with it because there was no state budget.
And that's one of my biggest worries is we take this over and there's just no movement for 12 years and it's just something that we dump $10,000 a year in, or I don't know if it'll cost that much after you get it fixed up because you're just going to let it deteriorate further and further. But
Well, I mean,
Or it just
people are
becomes
walking the
It just becomes a walking trail, an
line.
unimproved walking trail.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because you look at how many people will go out to Wildlife Prairie Park and they just walk the trails.
how's you going to get to Wildlife Prairie Park from this trail?
No, I'm
That'd
saying
be
people
trick.
do.
Yeah. Except that one, at least, I mean, it's just going to keep washing out, though. I mean, eventually, portions of this will be impassable if you look at the pictures. I mean,
Yeah, and that's something that we could look at in the future times, That we
I just wanna
are,
make
we are
sure the
putting money
village-
aside every month for that.
has an out.
Zach, you've walked the trail.
I'll talk to ID.
I think some portions of it are like very walkable by
He's only walked to Tivoli.
Where'd you start at?
my backyard.
Okay. You walked all the way to Trevoli?
In
Like
the brush.
like Brandon said, there are definitely some parts impassable. Those will need to be cleared. But as it stands, I think it could be a very good just personnel walking trail. Like maybe we don't necessarily need to sink a bunch of money into paving it, laying down asphalt or whatever. We could potentially keep it as a walking trail. I like it as a walking trail. Walking on the grass feels nice.
With the parts that were impassable, what did you have to do?
It's just
Trees.
there was one portion right when I got to Eden Road that I had to get off and kind of like
Go around the hay bales that were on the track.
that too. And then there was a portion where I had to go into a recently tilled field, which was fun. Going down to my ankles in soil, just go around that. And everything else is mainly just overgrown shrubs and trees. Not something that would cost an arm and a leg to develop.
Somebody could go and
Did something make you stumble or anything like that?
No, it was really
Use the weed.
level, flat.
Use the weed.
I'll go in and do some stuff like that. I love doing stuff like that.
Take my
chainsaw out there?
I will say, I think the trail is already being utilized. There's a lot of evidence of like coyotes, I found coyote droppings on the trail.
Yeah.
That would be, that's honestly my liability issue. What if someone goes out at night and gets mauled up by coyotes or something?
Well, that's anybody's liability. That's a
Yeah,
personal
that's a
liability. You're
personal
walking by yourself at night. We can't control wildlife.
I will say there has been when we first started this, when Hannah City first took over kind of the spearheading this trail after Peoria County gave it up, we sent out a survey, and we had over 2,000 people in the region give their support to this trail, which tells me that there's a lot of interest in this trail.
Do you know how many people the survey was sent out to?
It was just done on Facebook, as a matter of fact.
And 2,000 people responded?
We had over 2,000 people respond, actually send in letters in support of this trail.
Yeah, I know Tracy or somebody posted something about it. Oh, and you guys were going to go out. She posted just to, if you see somebody out there, and there was a lot of people out there that were excited about it.
Yeah, it is something that this community has been looking forward to for a long time. Yeah.
In terms, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In terms of sort of next steps, if you want to greenlight this before the next meeting, so by March 30th, to me, the biggest question is money. So we need to be prepared with Hannah City's money. We need to secure Peoria County and Farmington. And then the third aspect of this is with the grant, our understanding is that the state does not just hand us the cash, that it could take 6 to 8 weeks and that they're reimbursing.
Right.
So we would need to aggressively pursue getting a loan for the 1.6 or so that the state would then reimburse for. So that is that's sort of from just brass tacks, setting aside questions about continuity and environmental and everything else, just the real practical issue of closing by the 30th. That would be to me, where we'd have to focus our efforts in the short term. Just getting the cash.
And to that, I've already spoken with the Bank of Farmington where we have accounts. They have agreed that they could loan us the money. I haven't talked terms with them or not, but they are very supportive of the project and have indicated that their bank would be willing to lend us the money in the short term as we wait for the grant money to reimburse us.
So what's our risk tonight if we say yes?
The risk is you're going to buy a road.
Owning 25 miles of trail.
Yeah,
It's going to be $3 million.
right. But we've got outs for that.
So if the vote is in favor of proceeding by the 30th, so assuming that there is not an extension, all right, then the risks are everything we've talked about. I mean, you're on your own with Farmington. You're not sure what the ongoing maintenance obligations are, what the deal is. You don't really know where the licenses are. You don't really know if you have continuity. The environmental is looking good. I'm feeling much better about that. In terms of getting the actual funds together, it's a matter of actually getting the cash from the other partners, plus getting this grant. Not the grant, but getting the loan negotiated, approved, and the cash in the door in the next 15 days. I presume there'd need to be a vote on that. Mike can help with that. And various approvals would be required for that. So probably it'd be a special meeting in a hurry, like on the 29th. Or before that, if possible, because, obviously last day is not the best.
I've got
So-
vote on, I didn't put that we were voting on money, but I put on whether we're going to proceed with the deadline for March 31st. Is that not?
Yeah, I'm a little worried that might not suffice to.
Open meetings there.
But yeah, I think it's possible that might be an Open Meetings Act violation, and we're dealing with huge.
Yeah,
numbers.
I think until you actually have a proposal from the bank and you're proposing terms of what the loan would be, I mean, there's going to be an interest rate of some kind. Issues like that would need to be brought, I would think, to the entire board. So, but that could be a special meeting on the fly.
So, Janik, I want to just streamline everything. We've talked about so much stuff. So, if we do decide to go ahead with it, we go ahead and start getting our ducks in a row for that. If the STB comes back and says, hey, no extension, it's a dead deal, right?
Well, that's what we're talking about here is if we tried to ram this thing through in the next 2 weeks. If the STB gives us the extension we've asked for, we have time to talk. We can get our arms around this better. Caleb can finish his work on lining up the parcels and so on. We can get this negotiated with Farmington, maybe work it out so that it's not, 25-75, so that it works better going forward. And we can work out with the bank how the loan and reimbursement would work. So frankly, if we get the extension, I'm breathing easier. What I'm saying right now is that if you all want to vote to proceed by the 30th, I foresee a special meeting happening and a lot of real serious work in the next week, including getting the loan and all of that. And I mean, you're taking a pretty substantial risk of getting out there on your own.
You have to assume if we do that, we are on our own, that Farmington's only going to kick in a small portion of it. And then we're going to be on the hook for everything until, a lot of people support it. A lot of people said click yes on Facebook, but that's,
And then I know there are, after the fact, if this does go through and we get it going, pushed through, there are some other grants that we can apply for maintenance and things like that. There are a ton of trail maintenance.
Both state and federal.
and the people are going to write the grants up. The one thing that gets, we're saddled with it when we get it. And if these grants don't materialize, and if everybody with good wishes doesn't actually turn their good wishes into money, that's $10,000 a year that we could be used in town too.
Well,
We have an expensive.
10 grand is,
Yeah.
10 is an optimistic. 10 is a number that we're using. That is not necessarily the right number.
Yeah, exactly. That's 10.
I've done some work on the. I'm sorry.
Our maintenance is not going to be more than 10,000 until we start developing it.
I wouldn't think, unless you kind of clear brush so people can. If you want to make it so people can actually walk down it, yeah, I would just let it go to pot until somebody stepped forward that actually wanted to develop it.
Or if you get a volunteer group come out and help clear a trail, because there are groups that do that. They do it all over the state. I know they come out and help clear trails.
Yeah.
All you do is ask, and they like, yeah, we'll send people down. They do that at Wildlife Prairie Park. They did it on the Eagle Scout projects. They've done it on the Monon, or not Monon. They did it on Rock Island.
Rock Island Trail.
Because they still do that. Even they still have volunteer groups that come in and help with that.
I have a question. How does the Hannah City Trail become possible if the date passes and no extension?
It doesn't.
And we didn't make. There's no possibility of
Actually, tonight is actually the vote. Because if you vote no tonight, this trail is probably done.
The railroad goes to. They said they'll go to official abandonment, like STB abandonment, which means they'll abandon and sell off.
Is there a possibility of us buying maybe just Hannah City to Farmington?
Possibly, but you're paying the full amount then instead of 20%.
Yeah, there's no grant for that. That's the problem. And the title issues become more complicated because you don't have the rail banking anymore. You'd have to do an analysis of whether there's been common law abandonment throughout that area.
Then if there is reversionary stuff that people haven't been compensated, then they will get that land back, and you may end up with you may not get a continuous track thing because you're not protected by the continuity that a railroad's protected by. That if there was a small mistake, it doesn't matter. At that point, they're selling it off, and then they acquired it. There's multiple different ways they acquire right away. And that's all going to come into factor when they completely divest of the rights they have in it.
So if we say no tonight, we're effectively just holding to see if we get an extension. If they say no, it's dead.
Right? Yep, exactly.
If we say no tonight and there is an extension, then we start moving forward. If we say yes tonight and there's no extension, then we're on the hook for everything and we can decide what we want to do after that.
We'd have to get all the financials together, have a meeting, let's say Tuesday the 29th, to vote on the approval of the loan or whatever, and
right,
go from there.
And then if the extension doesn't go through there, then we can find a way out if we want to, or figure out what our options are then. Right?
I guess your question is,
Yeah, I mean,
Jenny,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just, I mean, frankly, if you say yes and we can get the ducks lined up and they're in a nice little row, by the 29th, we could close on the 30th.
I think the
But
decision.
that's a big,
The decision tonight is: are we going alone and closing on the 30th?
Right.
Or are we going to roll the dice and see if the extension comes? And if it doesn't, we understand that we're dead.
and I will say that based on the prior meeting 2 weeks ago, it seemed as though you were more, fairly solidly in the second camp, in the latter camp. But today it sounds a little bit more on the line, so it is worth definitely having the discussion.
Yeah, and it comes down to, we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to get this and to build a trail.
Yeah.
Really, the vote tonight is the vote. And I know I've been in the seats you guys have been in. I know how difficult this is. And I don't want to sway you. But I really think there is backing for this trail. And I think that if you take the chance on it, I love this community. I poured 25 years of my life into this community, sitting on the board where you guys have been. And I don't want to do anything to hurt this community. But I really feel that we could make this into something that would be a benefit for the community. If not, I wouldn't be working so hard to try to get it done.
I've had a lot more questions answered
Yeah.
than I had previously.
Well, I mean, we've been putting money aside. We've got the grant. We've got it in writing. The hard part, it seems like, is to get that deal worked out with actually paying for it between Farmington and us. And
Peoria.
And Peoria said they're in on purchasing it.
We just need to get the
Peoria and Farmington are both in on purchasing. It's just the maintenance after the fact.
Is there any? I mean, we've talked about the liability, but in terms of like going forward and doing the actual purchase, is there any chance of it coming back and biting us? Basically, are we going to be sinking too much money into it, or are we?
I've got
good
an
financially?
analysis as part of the budget to show where we're at with capital, how much we're setting aside. Would that context be helpful for this discussion? Because we can jump ahead to that, or no?
I think it would, because it goes to the overall health of this community. Are we a healthy community? Do we have money? It's just like when we bought the schools off of the Farmington School District. That was a difficult decision for us because there's liability issues, asbestos issues, things like that.
Boiler.
We decided to do it, and I think it has been an asset to us.
So in your deck, there's a document that's like second to the last that's called Village of Hannah City 2022-23 Fiscal Year Budget Draft. Okay, I think this will give context to the discussion. So just process-wise, what we did is we reviewed the 2020 full year actuals. We looked at the 2021 year-to-date actuals and projected them out for the year. We kind of reconciled oddities, one-time only things that we knew either on the income side or the expense side, and pulled those out. We worked with staff to understand kind of needs and rationalize some things. We did some work to simplify the accounts, eventually, or propose we simplify the accounts, and then perhaps improve the accuracy to some degree. We developed a draft budget. I'm going to review it with you guys tonight, and then we would eventually finalize, including the levy and appropriations ordinance, and then you guys would come back and you'd have all the details, and then we would approve it. So this is just giving you some information tonight. So you go to the second page, capital allocation. Okay, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to really oversimplify this, and if I'm offending anyone, I apologize. So let's say you have a monthly income of $1,000, you have monthly expenses of $600, but you say to yourself, I want to put $300 into savings, and you're going to leave $100,000 in the checking account for your cash flow. Okay, the point is if you haven't allocated in your budget that $300 that $300 that you want to set aside, then you could overspend and you don't have that you put that 300 aside, but then you're overspending on your expense side. So from an accounting perspective, setting aside money for capital is not considered an expense, okay? It's only when you spend it is it considered an expense. But when you build your budget, you have to allocate for those dollars to make sure you have the cash flow to cover them. Am I making sense? Okay. So if I look at the 2023 budget draft, core funds without capital, so there's no capital set aside, there's no savings being pulled out of these numbers right here, okay? So what you can see is general income of 587,500, expenses of 503,843, and a positive variance of 83,657. So you can see for each of the core funds where we stand, okay? The good news is we are positive, we're cash flow positive on everything but water. We already knew that, okay? So the only business within Hannah City that we're losing money on is our water district, our water business. And we're currently losing call it $25,000 a year.
Is that included with the increased rate?
It is included with the increased rate. Yep, that 2.7% is in there. Okay, so the good news is on an operational standpoint, we've set aside, we are spending money for maintenance, general regular maintenance of the sewer system, of the water system, and those types of things. It's in these numbers. But setting aside capital for future sewer line lining or replacing water lines or those long-term capital things are not in these numbers. You with me? Okay. So if you go to the next slide, then what I did is I took our current capital. So let me show you. So on the right-hand side, I've got operating water, sewer, and sanitation. I'm sorry, on the left side. The current balance is how much money we currently have in each of our savings accounts, if you will, for those things. So operating, the bold number is the total. So that's basically 316, 269 for streets plus 150, 289 for the trail adds up to that 247, 882. Follow me? Okay. Water, we've got 402,073. So the tower project, we've got $287,419,000. Escrow, which comes in and out, so I really don't count it, but I put it in here anyway because we've got the accounts of almost 50,000. And then what I'm calling general capital, that's basically saving for line replacement or the other major projects that we're going to do somewhere down the road. So for water, we've got $65,360, which is probably insufficient for what we need to do moving forward. Sewer, we've got $206,438, so we got $112,606 in the IEPA loan. The payoff balance for that is currently $251,000. So if we wanted to pay off that loan, that's what we would have to spend to pay off and that basically bought us, correct me if I'm wrong, about a third of the sewer lines being relined or whatever. So we have 2/3 yet to do. You have a question?
Just quickly, that top bold number, is that correct? 247? Because is that the total of those three?
Should be the total
current balance.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. I didn't add that.
So it's actually higher.
Yeah.
So it's
You're
better.
right. Thank you. And then so sanitation, then we've got $78,976 set aside for basically the lagoon, not anything to do with the sewer line, but for the lagoon. Okay. So that means my total's wrong as well. Now to the
street number 316.
I don't think so. I think we've got. I can look it up.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
So then 2022-23 allocation, this is current capital. So today we're putting $60,000 a year away for streets. Okay. And that's how we built that 5-year street program around that. The trail, we're putting $12,000 away. For water, we're putting $30,000 a year away for the tower. Nothing for the other two, although escrow kind of comes in and out, so that's really non-applicable. For sewer, we're putting $30,000 away, and that's all for the IEPA loans. We're not putting anything else away for sewer support. And then for sanitation, we're putting around $18,000 away, $1,500 a month. So that's $150,000 total that within our budget we're saying we're pulling out and putting into savings for future projects. Okay. So then if you go to the budget, you can go to 2023, the next slide, it says core funds with current capital. If you put those capital numbers in the 2022-23 allocation, which is what we're currently putting away now, it puts us at a loss of around $5,000, $6,000 a year. And that's not a loss from the expense side. It would be a loss from the cash flow side. All right, everybody's following me. All right. So then I don't know that the next slide is optimal capital. I don't know if these numbers are right, not right, whatever. But basically what I did is I put $12,000 aside, $1,000 a month for building and grounds. If EMS buys the property over there, we're going to need to put up a new facility, and so we're going to need some money to do that. Even if we sell the property, we're probably only going to have half, maybe at most, to put up the new building. So there's some money that we're going to need to set aside for that. Now we can always take out a loan, but that would be something. So I put 12 grand in there. You guys can tell me if that number is high, low, whatever. Streets I left at 60 because that's where we're at. Trail I left at 12. Again, we could argue we need more. Water I increased, so I put some in for the water lines, and I left the tower at 30. So I added another $30,000 a year for general capital. Again, we can debate whether those are the right numbers or not. I just threw things in. I did the same thing for sewer. I added general capital for sewer line replacement or for the next loan, and I left sanitation basically where it was. So that 150 of savings went to $222,000 worth of savings. Okay. Again, you guys can argue whether or not I was bold enough, not bold enough. We can plug in whatever numbers you want. But at those numbers, then you go back and look at the core funds budget with optimal capital, and now we're losing $77,000 worth of cash a year at that level. Make sense? All right. So next slide, and again, we can debate this. We can do whatever you want to do. But I put recommended capital. So I put 12,000, left the 12,000 in for the buildings and grounds. I added that. I lowered the streets from 60 to 48,000. So we can still do our regular 5-year plan or 6-year plan or whatever that looks like. What that hurts is someday if we have a huge project that we want to do on Murphy Road or whatever, our surplus at the end to do those major projects is going to be impacted by that. 12,000 for the trail, depending on what happens tonight. I lowered the tower to 18,000, and I think there's a debate to suggest that we could lower it to nothing. Here's my point, and that's why I asked some of you for capital priorities, because that helps us decide what we're doing here. We've already got $287,000 set aside for the tower. We haven't found any grant money. Probably looking at if we do it, we're going to need a loan. If you get a loan, it's either going to be IEPA or USDA. Their forgiveness levels range anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000 forgiveness. So on $2 million, let's call it 50, right? So you got $1 million that you're going to borrow. You don't have to put the 287 down because there's no down payment that's required. You could put it down, I guess, if you wanted to, or you could use it to make your payments for a while. So there's a question of whether or not we need to continue to be putting away money for the water tower. And then I think the other debate is back to capital priority, is the question of, is the water tower high on the list? I understand that we all want it, but if the EPA doesn't show up tomorrow and say you have to do it, would we rather spend money on sewer and trail and buildings and grounds and water lines? These are good questions. I put general capital. I left the 30,000 in then for water lines. The IEPA loan is basically the same. General capital, I put in another $18,000, lowered that, but it would be for the sewer lines, and I took sanitation down to zero. At the end of the day, I talked to Jim about the lagoon. The next big expense we would have out there would be dredging. He said that's probably 10 years away before we would need to do that. We just spent all that money cleaning the filters. So if we've got $80,000 in there, that probably carries. I said, how long does that carry us? And he said probably 5, 6, 7 years unless something major happens. So I'm not suggesting these are right. I'm just saying based upon the input that I had, I was trying to move the levers around to look at it. And that gets us to $168,000 worth of capital. Again, I think it would be good for us to have a debate around what level of savings or capital do we need to be putting aside and for what purposes. I think these might be close, but again, your input would be valuable. So in order to get that 168 to where we would need it to do, we'll go to the next slide. It says recommended capital. So this would require an increase in the monthly water charge. If you remember right, just operationally, we're losing roughly $25,000 a year on water. So I met with the team. And I said, do some research, do some benchmarking. Tracy did a really good job. Cassandra built a really nice spreadsheet for us to look at all what current people are paying and what our rates are. And we learned two things. One, we have a really complicated system. And we found some others that are doing it that are more simplified. Well, we learned three things maybe. And the other thing is we're discounting the more people use, which the RCAP people told us is a mistake because the more they use, the more they're using the system. So maybe they should actually pay more. Anyway, to get us to break even and beyond, we said that the base rate we should move our minimum from 2,400 down to 2,000 gallons and just get it on a even number and make it easier. And then what we would say is for every 1,000 gallons over that, we would charge $8.50 a gallon, not the tiered approach that we have now. And we didn't look by name, but we had every person and we looked at what the increases would be by every person if we did it this way. And it balanced out pretty well because we wanted to be equitable in the change. So the base rate would need to go from $24.59 to $27, and we'd make this other change on the 1,000 gallons, and that would be effective May 1st, and I'll show you the impact of that in a minute. I've also got a presentation in the back on the garbage contract, which comes up in September. We bid that out. We've got all the bids in. We've got a recommendation that we want to make. And here we'd be saying the rate goes from $12.06 to $14.50. I know that's a big jump, but we haven't done anything on garbage since 2014. And we would put it effective September 1st, and I've got all the details of what that looks like. But it would be one change on the garbage pricing that would not change again for 5 years because that's the length of the contract, and that's the way we've done the old ones. If you go back to 2014 and look at the increase we did then plus this one, over the span of time, it's 20 cents a year increase. Now, granted, it's all at once, so it'll be painful, but it's only 20 cents a year increase. So the total water increase is $241. Garbage increase was $244, so that takes us up $485. So all utilities minimum, we're basically asking people to pay about $5 more a month. Okay. So then, if you go to the next slide, you can see in the yellow what that does to the income. So the price, garbage and water go up to those levels, and if we had the recommended capital, that 168 capital expense, we're basically at break even now. Okay. I know that was a lot. But our logic is it gets water to break even operationally. It gives us a little bit of money for capital. Garbage, we're going to have to make a change anyway. So that buys us some dollars. 168 or 170 may or may not be the right level of capital. And we can have that debate. You guys can tell us whether we're putting enough away or not, or change it around. Maybe you think it's too much. I don't know. And this is not an argument against the trail, okay? But to Fred's point about the health of the community, if the trail doesn't go forward, we've got $150,000 sitting right there. You take that plus what we've got in sewer, you pay off the loan, right? You pay off the EPA loan, and now the money that you're putting aside, you get another $500,000 loan. You do the next 2/3, right? But you don't have a trail, and you don't have the future income potentially that the trail could bring in. Maybe the trail capital is going to be more than $12,000 a year, or maybe we get the commission set up and they get all kinds of donations and stuff, and we don't even need the $12,000 a year, so we can shift that to someplace else. The point of this is not to suggest that the trail's right or the tower is right or whatever. I think we can have debate about this. The point is to suggest, and to your point earlier, is that every decision we make to spend $1 has an impact on another place where we could spend that $1. And the challenge is finding a balance that provides the best overall service to the community. I'm going to shut up now.
So what you're saying, what I gathered, is us going forward with the trail would not be to the detriment of the other services and things we provide.
It would not. No, it would. I don't think it would be a detriment at all. No. I do think there is a fair debate to be had about, are we setting aside enough capital for, bread and water type things, maintaining the sewer lines, maintaining the water lines, and so forth. What we tried to do here, as we talked about it, was to build something that kind of gives us a balanced and fair approach moving forward that allows us to do as many things as we possibly can. But yes, I don't see it as a detriment. Now, if the trail winds up being a huge expense, or if we have if we can play what if all day long, there's other issues. Janaki, did you have a question?
Well, listening to this discussion kind of highlights this question of the cost benefit analysis of the trail. And there was some discussion of this at the last meeting. It seems like most of the enterprises that you're undertaking and the costs that you all are undertaking are really necessary, non-discretionary costs that a municipality has. The trail is an entirely discretionary expenditure. You are not obligated to go forward with it. And it has a lot of risk associated with it. The upside is harder to pinpoint what the upside of the trail is. As Fred pointed out, it's a rare opportunity, but it's an opportunity that, for whatever reason, other municipalities other than Farmington are not willing to participate in with you. And they're not willing to take on any of that risk or that potential liability that you all are taking on, or thinking about taking on. And this causes me pause. And it causes me pause advising you about just the liability and the risk involved when we're talking about parts of this trail that are 15 plus miles from your borders that you would still be responsible for. Now, clearly there has been an investment by your community over time that has enabled us to get to this point where there is this kitty sitting here designated for trail, and you all have been so carefully setting aside money in your budget every month toward trail expenses and so on. So there is a real commitment here, and that is very laudable. I think that to try to ram this through in the next 2 weeks without having the opportunity to look at those licenses, look at the land, get the intergovernmental agreement squared away, even getting the loan done in a reasonable way is fraught. And that we discussed 2 weeks ago, we discussed it 6 weeks ago, we discussed it 4 weeks ago. There is more risk if we try to ram this through in 2 weeks. That being said, if we don't get the extension, we don't get the extension, and all bets are off. And we don't have that opportunity anymore. I think it's a real balance, and I don't envy your position at all, for those of you who are going to be considering this. But I think that from the point where I first became involved, when Peoria County, it was our understanding, was on board to be a real partner in this, to take on 50%, roughly half, a little less, of the liability and the ongoing costs associated with this, to now being just Hannah City and the village of Farmington out there on their own, it does very much change the risk profile to you. And while there is obviously real benefit to this project for the community, not necessarily in a quantifiable way, but obviously you want your community to have amenities like this. It's a nice thing to have, and it is an opportunity, as Fred said, that does not come along very often. It is, however, much less of a necessary expenditure than your water and your sewer and your roads that obviously you have an obligation to provide. So there is a balance here. I think that it's possible to get it done in 2 weeks. I think Caleb can tell you that there would be risk involved in terms of what we're buying. We won't really know. I think Todd can tell you that, or Brandon can tell you that there would be some concerns about those ongoing maintenance obligations and environmental potential issues. We don't know about Travola and their flooding situation and all. And those are all things that we could know better if we had a little more time. The question before you today is, are you willing to take on the risk versus the benefit? So considering the balance, are you willing to take on the risk of forcing this through in 2 weeks on your own? Or do you need more time? And in the event we don't get more time, it's just an opportunity we're gonna have to forego.
I think it's important that you guys know that, in the conversations I've had with Johnny, she is not anti-trail. I asked her to be forthright and candid based upon her opinion as to what the risks are, and that's her job, is to point those out. She's not trying to sway you one way or the other. She's just trying to give you her vantage point and do what a good attorney does and make sure she highlights the risks. At the end of the day, that's
what we pay her for.
That's exactly what we pay her for. And I wanted, she was worried about coming across as anti-trail, and I told her to take the gloves off and speak your mind. That's what we need and what we want.
What we need.
And so thank you for that.
And I will tell you that as a transactional attorney, when we're doing deals like this, I mean, the last thing that I want to do is rain on anybody's parade and stop a deal. That's the worst. That's not what I want to do. I want to make it work. I want to find a way to make it work. That is why I'm hired, is to try to find a way to make it work if it makes sense. So,
yeah.
And that unfortunately is your job to make the ultimate decision.
I have another question about legality. Is there a way to have the Hannah City own it, but the 501c maintain it?
We messed up when we first started this, is we should have established the 501c3 at the very beginning and had them apply for the grant in their name. It's similar to what the Madison County Transit Authority did. You know, they were a group that did that.
They're a 501c3 or are they a public body?
They're a public body.
Okay, so they have a tax levy that pays for their trail.
Right. But there have been some that have been set up with a not-for-profit that has applied for the grants, gotten the grants, and moved forward on it. We did not do that because we weren't the ones in charge at the very beginning.
Peoria County, we didn't worry about it.
Was the lead agency, and that's kind of we were getting information from IDNR helping us work through a lot of this stuff. Unfortunately, the main driver of this project, who was with IDNR, has left IDNR, and he retired and is no longer there. So that's kind of why we called Johnny to get us the legal stuff, because we don't.
But it sounds like for $150,000 we can transfer ownership to them for a trail.
If it comes down to that,
you lose some control, right? But,
you'll lose control and you'll lose the money that's been invested in it.
Yeah.
But we don't have to repay the grant. Is that correct? If I'm not following this.
As long as
transferring of the 150.
Right, as long as it stays as a trail, then we don't have to repay the grant.
Okay. So that's another way in case maintenance gets out of control, or maybe even the continuation problem with the line. Is that something that we could still transfer over
to IDNR? We default?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the big question: is what happens if you get in? If we did do it and get totally upside down, what's the way out? I mean, are you just out the money you put in, which would be the cleanest break, and then you can just walk away from it, and, or is there something else there?
And I'm going to firm that up tomorrow to the extent I can with IDNR and really pin them down on that question. To the earlier question, Hannah City is the owner, but obviously you can, use volunteer resources, donated resources, and so on to help maintain. It's just that in the end, that liability stays with Hannah City. So the
Well, I
liability is
like
Hannah City.
the maintenance of it. Like,
Yeah,
you,
and even maintenance.
I mean, can we be, it's almost like
If the
we,
charity's got to have money, so yeah, sure. If the charity has $100,000, it can take care of it forever.
well, no, I didn't know if there was a legal way to transfer, like, subcontracted out to
You
the
wanna outsource it.
501c.
You want to outsource it? Yeah,
Yeah.
They, can do
Yeah.
they can do the work.
There's every state park in the state.
Well, so then we're not, somehow that
No,
we're
we're
not
responsible for everything.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still responsible.
Still
There's a lot
responsible.
of state sites that have Friends of. There's Friends of Rice Lake, Friends of Giant City State Park, Friends of almost every state park out there. They're a volunteer organization. They have some charity. They raise some money. They'll go out and do something. But,
Okay.
some general maintenance that they work in conjunction with the park. If that ever got going with this, I mean, how much money's in the account now for the 501c3? Did they transfer any balance when they changed the name of it from Rock Island, or
There is a small balance right now.
small as in 10,000 or small as in $10?
It's probably around 4,000 or 5,000.
Okay.
One thing I didn't mention.
Who administers that?
Right now, it's Friends of the Rock Island Trail, basically. They have an organization set up for Friends of the Rock Island Trail. They've transitioned to a group called Trail Advocates that's working under a different 501c3. So we changed the name of the Friends of the Rock Island Trail to Build the Hannah City Trail.
So they left that 501c3. So they're no longer administering that fund.
Well, technically, yes, they are still the owners of that 501c3, and they're still the board members.
So they're still filing the tax paperwork for it and everything like that. It's not just,
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
And they're an established group then.
Yes.
And they've agreed to make sure that stays a viable fund and the tax paperwork gets filed.
Until we purchase it, yes. And then
Where does it go?
I have to establish an organization that will take it over.
Yeah.
You just have to establish a committee, then that will take that 501c over.
Yes. Because right now it's still in their name, or they are still the board members of that 501c3
Until their board dissolves and then
until
you
their
guys
board
create a new
dissolves.
board.
We get a new one.
Yeah, they're going to be trail advocates. They're going to keep their fund, and when somebody's ready to take that one over, they're going to kick it off with a small balance. And
Or they'll transfer it to where they are now.
or if this doesn't go through, they'll just take the money out of it and dissolve it either way. Yeah. So somebody has to set that up to keep administering it in perpetuity.
Right.
Yeah.
I see your Golden Hannah City Trail was originally established in 1983 and changed its name in 2021. So
About that.
Just real quick, one thing that's later in this presentation that I didn't get to, there is another bucket of funds, which is the BDD dollars. So there's roughly $80,000 a year coming in for that I believe can be used for infrastructure projects, if I'm not mistaken, Fred. Now that there's a cost to that too, right? So if you take that money and use it for infrastructure, now you're not putting it into new businesses and new operations and trying to bring new stuff in. I just wanted to make sure that it was there so we knew you guys knew all the options or all the.
And in my mind, that's dead. I mean, that's
earmark.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to take that money, that's, to improve it on discretionary costs like that. I mean, because pretty soon you're spread yourself thin. You don't get to improve anything you want to do inside.
Yeah. So what it comes down to is, to the board members, I have to thank Fred and Janicki for all their hard work that they've gone through so far on this. But
And I'd like to just say that Janicki has been great to work with. She's been very responsive, and I appreciate all the work she's put into this. I really do.
Yeah.
She's done a great job for the village.
Yeah.
But she's married to a knucklehead.
You're still being recorded.
You can review that later, Janicki.
I'll tell him you said that.
But what it comes down to is, do we want to, you as a board, want to go ahead and push forward with this and try to get a loan done and, get the funds from Farmington and Peoria County before deadline to go ahead and push through this agreement before the STB deadline. That's what it comes down to. And
Well,
in doing
the way I
so,
see it is, if we don't proceed and say, no, we're just gonna wait, then we have no option if they say that we're not gonna get an extension.
Right, by the
But
30th.
if we do go ahead, I mean, we can say, yeah, let's go, and we can try and get all this work prepared and ready. On the 28th, we can make the decision of, yeah, let's go ahead and close. Maybe by then we'll have a little more information on whether we're going to get the extension. Like I say, I think we should say, yeah, let's try going forward right now. Make the decision on the 28th. Be prepared, if we can be prepared to go ahead and proceed. Hopefully we'll know more information by then.
So emergency meeting on the 29th, which would be a Tuesday, or 28th on a Monday or whatever. Between now and then, work hard to get the deal of the loan together. Jonathan, if we vote on the 28th or 29th and we add all the loan details and all that kind of stuff, and that gets approved, then we can close, correct?
As long as the money's in hand, we'll need to talk to Farmington and Peoria County, get the cash, and be ready to roll. The actual closing on this is quite simple. There's no title company or anything. The documents are pretty much attached to the purchase agreement, so the mechanics of closing are not difficult. Again, we'd be foregoing the efforts to check the line lines up, and that we know what we're buying, and that we know where those licenses and things are.
What are your thoughts?
Because that's not happening in 2 weeks.
That's not happening. Even if everybody at Farnsworth and everybody I could work together, I don't know if we can look at it all.
Yeah, I haven't been in that bucket at all. Kayla, I would defer to him. I know there are a lot. I just looked the list of licenses that was provided. There are a lot of them. I'm really not familiar with this.
Yeah.
Is after.
As you look at a lot of those licenses, though, there pipes underneath the.
I've looked at some. There's cattle crossing pipes underneath. I mean, there's a variety of everything.
Are there
everything.
a lot like from here to Trevoli or here to Farmington? Are they
I
on
didn't look that close.
Are they on the ends of the trail, or are
There's
they
some
here
all
in
over.
Hannah?
Well, there's some all over because you think it's 140 years.
Yeah.
and some
There's
of
been
those
something going
licenses,
everywhere.
and like we've said in the past, some of those licenses are probably no longer valid because they're go with a person, not with an
Oh yeah,
entity,
they're dog.
and they're dead.
They're
What
dead.
about that? Those people that came, they were soliciting that lawsuit when they
They're
sold
the
it.
ones who filed the lawsuit, and that was the.
I mean, did anything come out of that?
Everybody got paid money that had reversionary rights, and technically they're clear. But then the group that kind of represents these people is the one that filed the objection that says just because they got money doesn't mean feel like they've been compensated for their property.
Well, I mean, I was included in it, and they
Yeah.
said that no, mine didn't have anything, which I was fine with. I was like, okay, I didn't realize that was part of my property. Well, it wasn't. So they actually were lying to people, saying, well, yours is probably part of that property.
Oh, they cast a broad net. They cast a broad net.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would say that if anybody was going to have some issue, it would have been brought up at that time.
Well, their group filed an objection. Same day
Well,
that we filed for
because they want
objection.
more money.
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
they want the property back to the people. Yeah, I mean
That's what their goal is.
but they're
Yeah.
not. But the people were supposed to get compensated for that.
they did.
And they did.
Yeah.
So really, they don't have
Right. But
that
but
should
they're appealing.
override anything that was
But they appeal that.
previously.
That's their legal right to do. So.
Right.
So I think we have a proposal from Rod that says Fred and I pursue the loan with the bank. We have all those details together and bring it to the emergency meeting. Pick a date, 28th, 29th, whatever. We come together at that meeting. If there's no extension, then we have to make a decision as to whether or not we're going to take on the loan and sign whatever we have to sign in order to buy the property. Is that Michael, Joneke, do I have enough time to promote everything or post everything?
48 hours.
Okay.
48 hours from
And Johnny, we have enough time to process, and sign all the documents, and have it all done by the 30th?
If you've got the money, I think we can sign stuff.
I guess my point is, does that get us within the deadline of? Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
my other question for you would be, if we get the extension, then can we like not do the loan and wait?
If we get the extension, we're not doing anything
We're not
by the end of the
signing a loan
month.
or whatever.
Okay.
We're gonna wait and then do more due
I
diligence.
just want to make sure.
If we get the extension, nothing's happening at the end of the month.
Yeah.
If we don't get the extension,
We got a decision to make.
everybody
Yeah.
gets things.
Getting the loan will be preparing to go forward. So when we have that, but if we get notification that there's an extension before we get the loan and everything, we will tell the bank, hey, we're gonna hold off on this. We've got more time. We've got some more due diligence we need to do.
I'm assuming we'll get an email as a group if we get the notification.
Correct. Johnny checks every day. I think Fred probably checks every
I
day.
just checked it 5 minutes ago. Nothing new.
I checked.
Us-
one hour.
Yeah, we'll send it out. They'll let us know and I'll send it to you.
I hope the
Yeah.
extension comes through.
My next
Guys,
question.
I would suggest that the special meeting happen Monday night, the 28th, just to give us an extra 24 hours. I'm actually going to be out of town, but that makes no difference since I only appear on Zoom anyway. So I'll be participating from elsewhere. That's fine. So
My
the
question
28th.
is I know this is by the STV, and the STV is a government organization. Is there anybody we can call? Anybody I can harass? Because I love doing that.
I think Johnny already is, aren't you?
Well, Fred got the congressman to send in a letter of support. Even before the IDNR. So I think more letters like that doesn't hurt.
We can have Darren LaHood's office contact them again just to see what the status is. We'll do that. I'll do that tomorrow.
Yeah, try to force them into a decision. That would be great. I'd love to see an extension come through. Because 15 days is quick to close on a house.
Yeah.
15 days is quick to close on an empty lot.
Hey, it's only 20.
It's an empty lot. It's just a big,
Yeah, big empty lot. And our guys will drive 20 miles to make that if something goes wrong.
And then-
We have a motion for Rob.
I will second the motion.
Sorry, I'm trying to. It's 9.
It's past Brian's bedtime. He's going to turn it into a.
We're moving forward. Proceed.
trying to get a loan.
Trying to get the loan.
Trying to get funding.
Emergency meeting.
And to acquire, not to acquire, but to get funds from Peoria County and from Farmington for their portion, because we'll need to have those in hand when we go to do closing.
We also need to make that intergovernmental agreement.
Agreement.
That's not already been read now yet.
Has that been,
That's not been
So
The
you
inter-
have the intergovernmental agreement for the acquisition. That was done a while ago. So that part's done. So the cash for the acquisition is there. The question about the next step, the ongoing maintenance and operation costs and partnering with Farmington, I will be bothering Fred and Brian for sure tomorrow, and they'll enlist whoever else is going to get dragged along to meet with the mayor of Farmington within probably early next week and hash out whatever we can.
so we have a motion by Weaver, we have a second by Sidak. Any further discussion? And what we're voting on is to go forth and pursuing getting the funds from Farmington and from Peoria County, and also going to the bank and talking about the loan.
I mean, honestly, the whole discussion we've been having tonight has been putting more in the camp of yes for me than no. That's what it's come down to. I think there's more positives to it. It's a less than ideal situation, definitely, but I don't think I think there's more reasons to go through with it than there are now.
Any further discussion?
We need roll call.
We need a roll call.
We're not spending money.
Yeah, so I asked earlier. I'd wondered, we're just going to do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, we're just.
that's what I was
No,
curious
we'll have
about.
to vote next.
Okay, well, we can
Next
still vote.
Well,
we'll still just do a vote. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries.
You were to the minutes.
Yeah.
Step 2.
Finally on
2
step 2.
hours.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve the previous minutes.
Okay, good
I've looked at them by now.
Hey, I'm leaving, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
Johnson.
Hey,
Have a motion by Johnson, second by Sidak. For the previous meeting minutes, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Treasurer's report.
You can see the treasurer's report in front of you. Make a motion, we pay all outstanding bills except treasurer's report.
Thank you.
I have a motion by Johnson, a second by Weaver. Any further discussion?
No,
Motion.
that was Zach.
So we'll roll call it. Ryan,
Yes.
Sidak,
yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
and Weaver.
Yes.
Motion carries. Engineers report. Please tell me you have nothing.
I wanted to go through a PowerPoint presentation.
Well, we'll skip that. We're going to next
I
meeting.
have nothing. I will say that.
I'm the benefits of recycling plays asphalt.
I was having to bring some insurance. No, I will mention mine. I know we did submit that, the MFT program we voted on last time too. One thing Joe brought up that's important. I know we're trying to be in a hurry and trying to get out in front of this, but frankly, we can't spend money until May 1st. The program doesn't start until May 1st. So, we're in good position. So, yeah, all has been submitted, and appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Michael?
Only update I have is we got a signed copy of the telecommunications franchise agreement from Stratus today. The one in your packet's not signed, but
The signed one was right here for you to sign before the meeting. It was right here.
well, we've got it. So whether we sign it right now or tomorrow, that's it.
Okay. Administrative report.
Yeah, so the February financials, you got the deck there. I'll go real quick, just stop if you have questions. So slide 2 for the month, where we had 91,953 of income, 113,243 expense. So we were negative 21,290. I'll explain that in a second. On the second page, if you look at general, we had double police bill because we missed one for last month, or the timing of it. So we paid the police twice. So that was part of it. And we also had $8,200 of trail expenses. So under general, we were actually positive if you take those two things out. If you look at water, we had a double purchase on Illinois American. So we had 2 bills in 1 month that we paid for the month of February. And again, that's just a timing thing. The income actually on water was strong, but that explains why we were behind for the month in total as well. MFT, really nothing noteworthy there. Hot stop TIF, definitely nothing noteworthy there. BDD, our income still remains around 11,000, 12,000. In March, we'll be looking at starting to get the payments for the coffee can repayment of the parking lot. So that should start coming in March. Year-to-date core funds, so we're 220,023 to the good year-to-date through 10 months. That's on slide 4. So if you take that center column down, so that's good news. We're $220,000 to good. But again, if you remember, we've got $150,000 worth of capital we're setting aside, so we're technically $70,000 or so to the good. If you look at the core funds, I just put a note on there between water and sewer. We brought all the ARPA income, COVID income into water, and some of that needs to be moved to sewer to cover some of those expenses. When we make that change, water will be rather than 25,891 to the good, it'll be negative 17K, and sewer will be 64 to the good once we make those adjustments. So again, water continues to be our main issue. MFT, nothing new there. The negative number, remember we paid out of the surplus, the savings that we had set aside. Year-to-date TIF, we're negative. I did check with Gwen, but we got to borrow money to cover that negative loss, and we can pay it back if we want. Wynn suggested we did it from BDD. You and I talked about doing general, but we pulled it from BDD, didn't we? Okay, so we're going to borrow the money to make sure we have the cash in that account. BDD, the double payment did come in, so that 107,642 income is right. We had 1 month where we didn't record the income. That is now in, so that is a real number. So we've had 107,642 of income in BDD so far, so that's great. Cash, we're cash flow positive. I'm not going to go over the summary because I covered everything. The last chart shows seasonality, which I'm just throwing in there and tracking help when I build the budget. Questions for me? Second thing, we just went through the fiscal year budget. I got through everything with the exception of, if you go to slide 6, there is the MFT budget that we actually built with Farnsworth. So 75,100 of income. You can see what's MFT, what's rebuilt. You can see the expenses, which is what we're putting into the program. So we'll have a negative variance of 8360 for the month. We're doing everything we said we were going to do, but Murphy, and that the negative amount will come out of the surplus that we got on the street savings. So that's what I'm suggesting for the MFT budget for next year. The TIF district budget, again, we're losing money. We're showing a $3,400 negative next year unless something changes. So we're going to have to continue to borrow probably from BDD. Business development, basically I'm showing an income of $125,481. Most of that is for the 1% additional sales tax. And then I just took last year's expenses and projected them out. The two big ones are professional services. There's $15,000, and I think most of that's Jacob and Klein. It was the year we brought it up, so I doubt it's going to be $15,000, but just in case I stuck that amount in there to be safe. And then I threw $35,000 in for projects. I don't know what we're going to spend or not spend. I just threw a number in there to show something. So we've got money under BDD. So next steps, I guess to me, the question I've got for you guys is, and I know we've gone through this really fast, but in general, what I walked you through, do those budget assumptions make sense? Anything? You don't need to vote on anything tonight. What I'm asking for is, are you comfortable with the budget assumptions? Are you comfortable with that recommended capital allocation, roughly $168,000 and the mix? And we can change that if we want. But what I want to do is if you're comfortable with it, I'll build the final detailed budget, and then we'll put together the appropriations ordinance, and we'll bring all that back here, and you can look at all the detail before you vote on it. Are you comfortable with the water pricing change? Are you comfortable with the garbage proposal? And I've got the details on the garbage proposal that we can go through. Any concerns, questions as I shared that with you?
Did we not do an ordinance on the water rate increases last time?
We did.
We had an ordinance.
We'll have to change that ordinance.
Yes.
We will.
Yeah.
We'll have to change both that, and I'm assuming we have one on garbage too that says what our garbage rates are. Is there an ordinance for that or not?
I don't think it's an ordinance. It's just whatever rate we have.
So the water rate one would need to be changed to minimum being, if we'd agree, minimum being 2,000, and then
Those numbers are all in our code, right?
yes,
Yeah.
Amending the code, yeah.
Yeah, ordinance instead of just changing the whole skeleton of it basically.
When I went through the presentation earlier, was there anything where you thought, gosh, struck you as that spooks me on the financials? You're not gonna hurt my feelings.
I don't think so.
You don't have feelings.
We're voting
Some would
on
agree
that
with
next
that.
time?
Say what?
We're voting on that next time?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have all the detail together. I'm just looking for generally, are you supportive of what I've got here? You are? All right. Garbage contract. I'll walk through it really quickly. So, history. We got approximately 535 locations. Our current cost is $11.50. Our current charge is $12.06. As I looked at the history, what we've done is when we sign a new contract based upon the history, we've taken the full total price of the new contract up front and held it out over 5 years. And we base that over always having 50 cents or more higher than what we're currently being charged. So if our cost is 10, we were charging $10.50 in order to make sure as people come in and out that we had a little buffer to take care of it. Our last price increase was 2014. It went from $10.50 to $12.06, which is a $1.56 increase. The services on our current contract are trash and recycle. Our process, we solicited bids from PDC, which is now GFL. They were bought out by a big Canadian company. we've got a bid from G&O. We did an evaluation. The team looked at multiple years, varying service options. We also did a little negotiating. We've been tracking feedback from residents on garbage problems. We sent that back to GFL, which is the one that we were most interested in. We also had discussion on landscape and bulk inclusion, and I'll talk about that in a second. The team's recommendation is to sign a 5-year agreement with GFNL. It would be standard service trash, but landscape would be included in this, and I'll give you the details on that in a second. So 2022, starting in September, our cost would go to $11.96. 2023, $12.44. 2024, $12.94. 2025, $13.46, and 2026, $14. That was about against GNO, it was at least $1 and some higher. At GNO, the lowest year comparison was like 68 cents. So
they were quite a bit higher this time.
They were.
Before it was pennies.
And then the other thing is that we really like is the additional services included. So they're going to have home landscape waste pickup. So they will come by your house and pick up landscape waste twice in the spring and 4 times in the fall, included in this pricing. And it was still cheaper than.
And what is included in that landscape waste?
There'll be rules, but it's sticks and grass and
leaves, anything over 4, nothing larger than 4 feet. Twigs must be bundled with twine. Yeah. Or they can be in craft paper bags, or they can be in a receptacle that's clearly marked as landscape waste. No plastic bags.
So we're getting 6 pickups of landscape waste.
They just offered that in, or we solicited for it?
Well, we asked them what could they do on landscape, and then they came back and said this is what we can do. GNO was they put out a dumpster and people could come and add their stuff to it, and then they would pull the dumpster away. But this is at home, and we thought with some of our older residents that this would be better. And then I actually got an email today. Timing was interesting, but they're going to do electronic waste as well. So at least once a year where they'll have a dumpster where if you have old TVs or that kind of stuff. And so they threw that in.
So GNO not offering any yard waste.
They offered some yard waste, but it was different. It wasn't at house, and it was $600 more a year, I think, was the number.
So even with that taken out, they would still be higher than.
Oh yeah.
So I wonder if that extra cost with their lack of manpower from GFL is what drove them up, or because last time they were a lot closer. I mean, last time they literally were shaving pennies. I mean, difference between PVC.
I think when we looked at each year, I think the closest GNO got to these numbers was like 60, 68 cents, something like that. And again, if you wanted the landscape, it was another $600. Now the flip side is a lot of people tell me their service was better. They took everything, so people were happier about that. But we did get the landscape waste, the electronic waste built in, and then one bulk service, which is also going to be home pickup, and that'd be after the garage sale. So not rather than big dumpster, they'll go by and pick up the bulk stuff.
Yeah, everybody's done that for probably the last decade too.
Okay.
Is there any way to get like a calendar sent out?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, once we get a
every year.
contract signed, we'll get a calendar.
There's recycling.
I mean, like
So it'd be trash,
the first year we
recycling.
had it, I got a magnetic one I could put on.
Because I know our current
PVC
company
sent it
doesn't
out.
take glass, right? Does this one take glass?
No.
It's the same one.
Oh,
No.
They just got bought
PVC
out
got
by
bought by
different.
I always wanted to change.
No.
Yeah, they don't take glass. There is the recycle on glass anymore is so low.
I think it's a cost.
Yeah, it actually costs them now.
I think it's a net negative for them to have to sort it out and get rid of it. It goes to the landfill.
The last slide, if you look at the pricing recommendations, we'd be going from $12.06 to $14.50. That's a $2.44 increase effective in September. Basically, we took the 5th year of the contract, added 50 cents to it, which is what we've done historically. And I know that's a big jump. That's $2.44 a month. But if you factor it out all the way back to $2.14 and take the 2 increases, it's 20 cents a year, basically, since 2014 to the end of this contract is what the increase would be. And there would be no additional increases on garbage for 5 years. And that's what I've got built into the budget assumption.
And it's still far cheaper than getting your own individual pickup scheduled.
So again, if you guys are comfortable with that and the budget, I'll put the details together. If you have any thoughts on the capital assumptions, like how I'm allocating the capital, tell me. You can look over there and see how much we're putting away each year. Do you think sewer's too high or water's not high enough, or you think, we need to be doing, I guess you, and do you think streets, I don't want to take any money away from streets needs their 60, we need to have those debates.
Well, and here's a question. If something happens, let's say we have a major sewer meltdown, can you take money from a different fund?
We have
To pay that.
capital expense.
Yeah, we would have to, if we could, you can tell me, but I think we'd have to vote. If we've got money set aside for streets, but we have a major emergency, we just have to vote to reallocate those funds over there. The other thing we've got is if we're putting let's call it $70,000 a year into savings, if we have a major issue, all of a sudden, and we had to take out a loan to do something, we can divert some of that savings into taking care of that. I mean, I give Fred and the gang a lot of credit, and the board a lot of credit. You guys have already been putting a good bit of money away. My challenge to us is to make sure it's the right amount and we're allocating it to the right things and we're covering everything that needs to be covered. So think about this too for the next time. The thing I brought up about the water tower, do we need to be putting money aside for the water tower?
That was my only place. You could almost probably steal the 18 from the water tower, restore the streets back to 60, and either lose the other 6 or put it in general capital for water, because when the water tower's done, that's kind of the linchpin. Then you would start looking at mains and working your way out, and
The only thing that I would caution you is to have some money in there in case there should happen to be a grant opportunity where you've got an 80-20. Make sure you've got 20% to cover.
What was our construction? What was your guys' estimate?
Yeah, I think we were, depending on how much other stuff you did, but it was right around 2. So
we got 278 already.
So that's 10%.
So yeah, 10% of it.
So I that was my initial impression that needs to begin to level off, whether it stops. But I think, just like Fred said, you get to that match point and then you look to see, is that still high?
I mean, my gut tells me, you guys push back if you disagree, but streets, water, sewer are the top priorities. Is that fair?
They're the 3 things that go to pop small towns. I mean,
yeah.
Can fill that tower and then that tower.
And then if we build a building, there's going to be cost there.
Yeah, you just have to deal with that when it comes up. Yeah. But yeah, those are the 3 things that
for that water.
go away.
And you're comfortable on the sanitation, not doing anything to the lagoon. We got almost 80 grand in there.
Yeah.
I mean, if Jim's recommending that, it's hard to argue against that.
Well, Jim had sanitation. I asked him for his priorities. He had it as 5th. He had water lines as 1.
Yeah.
Sewer lines as 2, which includes the IEPA. He had streets as 4 and sanitation as 5.
What's 3?
3 IEPA sewer and sewer lines. He has 3 too, but it's really
Oh,
low.
yeah.
Brian, when we last did this, we looked at spending, allocating money for sewer issues, and we did it from lining, and then pump stations, and then the 20-year fund was lagoons. When you say sanitation, is pump stations go in any? Where does that go?
You're talking about the lift stations?
Lift stations,
Yeah,
you guys have done a lot of
under,
upgrades.
to me, that's under sewer.
Okay, I would agree. If
Yeah.
I,
Well, we've also
Paid
got
for those, I think we've upgraded about every one just out of hand.
And don't forget, we've already got built into the budget because we've been repairing and doing things like so. We've already got kind of what do you think the general maintenance is? This is for major stuff coming, and we just replaced one with ARPA money.
Correct. So sanitation is purely the lagoon.
Yeah,
Okay,
and we got 80 grand in there, and the big chunk is. I don't. What did the dredging cost? Do you remember?
Oh gosh.
It was a bunch. 300.
I think it was about 300.
And that included all the rock and sand.
Am I right there? If I remember, that was like my very first processing.
That
So
could
the
be.
point is-
See, that's been several years.
No, you're talking 2 different things. We cleaned the sand filters a few years ago, but
That
I'm
was
talking
like
like
30
dredging
grand.
the lagoons out.
Yeah.
We're talking
Yeah.
about dredging the.
That was
the
like
actual
30,000.
ponds.
This is 300.
With
Yeah.
the dredging, basically, we scraped the lagoons and redid everything. Put in new pumps,
New blowers. Mm-hmm.
new blowers, and everything. And that was done probably, at least 15 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, I started in 02,
Oh,
and that was
wow.
my first project.
That was before me.
Yeah. So about 20 years ago, we did that.
Do they just crane in a suction barge and suck it out, or did they do all from
They
shore?
dewatered it. Got in there with dozers.
Oh, just pushed it up and. Oh, really? Okay.
And then we hauled it away. And
So what's your assessment on how quickly that would need to be done again?
well, I don't think it needs to be done again for a while because we just cleaned those sand filters. And when we did that, they did not look that bad. So,
Jim told me he thought he was guessing, but he said 10 years.
yeah, I would say at least 10 years, good life on those the lagoons.
I've done it before. Row your boat.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I'm not volunteering. Good on maintenance. You just want to go till it absolutely has to be done.
We'll get you a wetsuit.
That's a typhoid shot.
I'm done.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Okay.
The full bank
On
of
to committee reports. Finance.
Do I have anything? I have nothing.
Police and planning.
From 227 to 312, there was 23 incident reports. End of report.
23 reports.
Yes. They're all under miscellaneous now too, by the way. They don't divide them into different categories. Nor do we get our bi-monthly visit anymore from officer friendly.
Yeah, I have emailed them. I may have to call.
You have to go down there.
I will. Let me see. Yeah. Sanitary sewer, Pearson.
Nothing for sewer.
Okay, water.
Yeah, I've got some numbers for you if you're ready. 11 total shutoffs for a total of $2,096.76.
2,900.
2,096 and 76 cents.
Okay.
One total level pay. Oh, that's usually zero. I think that's the first one I've had. And 4 foreclosures for $511.93. And approximate gallons sold 1,955,495.
What was the amount on the level pay?
$323.90.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Buildings and ground.
We need to vote on this recommendation of GFL.
What is that? Garbage contract.
Garbage.
Yeah.
To be voted on now.
We can if you want.
Do it mid-September, you said?
Yeah, it would happen until September. Or, I mean, do we need to vote on the? I guess we do need to approve the contract. And,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you guys want to, or we can wait until it's the budget. If you're all in agreement.
Do we have a copy of the contract?
Yeah. Oh, we don't have a
We
copy
don't.
of the contract
No.
now. Just the summary. Yeah. I'll put it on the next meeting.
Okay, as long as the contract matches these figures.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have anything else. I don't have anything for streets and alleys.
Economic development. Saya?
Okay, well, as we all know, Megan Walker was here last meeting, petitioning us to pay for the scraping of their ceiling insulation. It's got holes in it that are causing leaks into the roof. It's causing inadequate insulation, and they want to scrape it all off, redo it, and have it painted over with fire retardant paint. I think she mentioned that it is actually not up to fire code right now with the way it is. If they were to have this done, it would have a rippling effect for the park district. They could comfortably have a lot more events, fundraising events, that allow them to basically do even more. It's kind of a hefty sum. I remember hearing them at their meeting saying that the initial estimate was $10,000. Now it looks like it's over double that. Yeah, this would come out of BDD dollars.
We currently have $103,874 in there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not necessarily business development, but I feel like this expense would be a good investment in our community.
And I did check with Gwen, and she said we could. I think we can spend the money on that. We have to do a formal plan and send it to her, and then they approve it before we spend it. But
we could also take a page out of IDNR's playbook and make them erect a sign saying it's paid for by Hampson.
Well, I think that if nothing else, we should do some communication that, buy local.
I was gonna say, I thought the park district was part of it was gonna say that, hey, this is your sales tax money to put to work.
Yeah, economic development,
Yeah.
working in Hannah City, and it's not a new business; it's a community thing. And again, you don't have to approve all of it either. I mean, I know that's what they'd like, but it's up to you guys as to.
Mind you, they have less than $5,000 of operating cash.
And they've honestly said that this roof it's the roadblock to get to everything else they want to do. They're trying to create, right now their meeting space is a future computer lab they're planning on putting up. They got other projects they want to get to, but obviously those are far more discretionary than this. So,
I was just there Saturday morning, and there was nobody else in there, and there was pieces of that floor on the the ceiling on the floor.
Yeah,
that old cotton insulation.
Yeah,
and I did want to add. She said that the little childhood daycare thing can't even have time all winter. These little kids have no place, and these are kids that obviously more than likely live in the area. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents.
it's a little hefty as far as things like this go, but I honestly feel like it would be a wise use of the money that we've set aside for investments in the community. So I will. How should I word this? Make a motion we spend this money?
Make a motion, for the expenditure of this
Expenditure
amount.
from the BDD.
I'll make a motion that we make an expenditure from the BDD fund of $25,830.
They gotta provide, this isn't the exact dollar amount. This was an estimate. I thought they had to get 3 proposals. Because this is what they gave us last time that said, okay, if we approve moving forward with this with a vote, then that authorizes the park district to go pursue to get 3 proposals. It's over $20,000 their tax value. So that turns them loose to go get 3 real estimates.
So does our
and they come
motion
forward.
say up to 25?
No, I think this approval is just to say that we will
help them out.
We will allow them to apply, basically, that we're going to fund this and that they can go get proposals. I don't even think we put a dollar amount on it.
We're writing a blank check.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
It's just for them to bring back 3 proposals, though. They'll still have to vote to spend the money,
Well,
right?
you've got a proposal in front of you of 25,000. So you know that if that's the proposal, you could make a motion to spend up to $26,000 to assist the park district from the VDD.
It's not a proposal, though. It's an estimate that was given. I don't think that I think Megan said that they weren't going to, this was, if they go out, I think this number may change slightly.
Right.
I don't think this was actually the impression I got is she said, if you approve us to go out, we'll bring you back 3 rock solid numbers. I didn't think this was a solid, I thought this was really stinking close, but not a solid number.
I know the way the BDD process works is we have to establish an intergovernmental agreement with the park district.
Yeah.
So maybe the motion is that we approve an intergovernmental agreement to, provide them with X amount of funds for this
Or
project.
just establish an intergovernmental agreement. Do we even have to put a dollar amount on it yet?
I don't know. I
mean, unless it comes back crazy more than this, I imagine we're going to pay for it. We're all in favor of it last meeting, unless people soured on the park district in the last 2
I guess
weeks.
what I'm worried about, and I hear your point, but I don't want to delay it another.
Well, it won't, but she still has to go get 3. We can't just give them $25,000. She's still got to bring back 3 estimates. It's over $20,000.
Yeah. They have to put it out for.
They have to put out the
I
bid.
understand, but I think we can still give them $25,000 even if their estimates come back as something different.
I suppose, but if it comes back as 27, they might not do it because it's half their funds. And 27, $2,000 to us more out of BDD is nothing, but to them it's 50% of their funds. So that's why I don't want to cap it at something like 25 and have it come back at 27.5, and then we start over and delay it another month and a half.
I understand.
Yeah.
So the motion basically is to.
I mean, if we have a motion to intergovernmental agreement, the money can be. I mean, is that all we need to do with them to let them go get estimates on our behalf? basically, is what they're doing.
I don't think so. I think once that proposal comes in, the hard number,
Yeah.
I still think this body needs to vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But the motion right now would be just to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with them, and they're basically seeking estimates on our behalf for the BDD money.
Okay. No,
Does that make, and then next time we vote on the actual money that comes in.
That's my concern.
And if it comes in crazy high, like 40,000, we'll say, hey, we're going to cap this at 30.
Okay.
You know, we're gonna or whatever.
And we tackle it.
Then we decide the money next time. But,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't see a problem.
Because I don't want to.
You don't think this is a proposal? I mean, it says estimate.
I'm going by what she told us last time. Yeah.
Signature line. And,
that's not signed.
Yeah, I know it's not, but it's.
Yeah.
That's for the park district to sign if they want to accept this estimate.
Yeah.
It is over 30 days old.
I'm going by what Megan said last time is that she would then go out and get 3 actual proposals and bring them back to us.
That's my notes.
Yeah.
She needed to go out.
And if that's a legal requirement, then that's what we get.
Oh yeah. So I mean, maybe this place will come back to the exact same dollar amount. I don't know.
I think they will.
She go out and
My
get
sister-in-law is the treasurer, so
Oh,
I was talking to her, and she said that she was hoping that we would vote yes tonight.
Yeah.
On this. So I think that's what they're expecting is this number. But if they need 3, they got to go get 3.
Because of $20,000, you need 3.
And she said that she was going to get 3.
My notes.
Oh yeah, they have to get 3. Yeah.
I think to play it safe, I'll just make a motion that we enter into an intergovernmental agreement to fund this project. Is that adequate?
To allow them to seek
Pending them gathering
Board approval.
and definitive.
But they must present 3
Yeah.
bids.
Authorize, enter into the agreement to authorize them to go seek 3 proposals for the services for this and
to be voted on.
At the next meeting. I mean, I guess if this is that guy's number, then worst case scenario, you take this one because he's the lowest, and then if somebody else comes in cheaper, then it'd be less than this. But you know,
your concern was still setting a number today.
My concern was setting a number today in case they came back higher next time or something. I mean, I don't know how long ago they had this looked at.
10% more.
I just say we enter. If he's fine with it, we just enter into the agreement to let them go see.
I would think that's fine because we're not voting on anything. Involving spending money.
Lets them go get it. We agree to enter into the agreement with them to go seek proposals to bring back to vote on.
Okay, motion.
Yeah. Motion to be enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Hannah City Park District to allow them to seek 3 proposals for cost of having the ceiling replaced. Sound good?
On behalf of Hannah City.
No, don't need to be on their behalf. They have to do it on their own behalf.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're still the ones getting the project. The intergovernmental agreement is we're just giving them the money out of BDD to fund it.
So they were saying they couldn't go out and get bids ahead of time for. In other words, they couldn't go out.
They could.
Okay.
There's nothing that was stopping them. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
know that they
I
needed
just think
to.
they didn't want to waste other people's time. Right? We're going to consider funding.
Yeah, it almost made it sound like unless we said we were willing to do it, they weren't gonna go even get them. But yeah, they could have just brought them to us and then voted on the whole shoot match at one time. And
So Zach, you just need to tell her we're in, bring us 3 bids, show us the lowest one, and we'll vote on the improvement. Bring us all 3. That's what I said.
quick as she can get it done, then
Who would be?
Can you put it on the agenda?
If you need a second, you got one.
So I have a motion by Sidak, a second by Pearson. Do we have any further discussion?
That's been a nice Caleb that was going through things quickly.
Yeah.
You got off on a tangent.
So we'll roll. Actually, we're not spending any money for the intergovernmental. No. So, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Other business. Finally, telecommunications franchise agreement with Stratus. Everybody should have a copy. This is the same. This should be the exact same one that we did. For
Same terms with Mid-Century. not in their form.
Right. And they're clear on the telecommunication tax and.
They understand, yeah. Well, at least their attorney understands that we have 5% telecom tax that's already in effect.
They're just passing through town though. They're not even-
They're trying to service, I think, one customer right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You still get a tax, right?
Yeah. On gross sales.
Out of trouble for
The
one.
customer's not even in town.
I
Though.
think it's an important customer.
Yeah, the customer's not in town, so you won't get any proceeds from that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The key to this is we made the agreement with Mid-Century that we were going to require this of everybody that comes in. And so we wanted to treat them consistently.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to a cell tower out west of town.
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody, all the cell towers are fiber run to them now.
But they still want to dig under our rights of way.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Make a motion, we approve this.
Second.
Motion approving ordinance number 22-03-01. Norms authorizing approval of telecom franchise agreement with Stratus Networks. Motion by Johnson, second by Sidak. Any further questions? Roll call it. Sidak?
Yes.
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
Pearson? Motion carries. Our next regular scheduled board meeting is April 5th. We will
Probably have one on the 28th. I'll summarize this all like I normally do and send it out tomorrow, but we'll go from there. But most likely we'll have a meeting on the 28th, and then I guess we can decide whether we need another one on the 5th or not.
I'm guessing the 28th will just be about that.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what
It'll be
it's a special meeting.
short meeting.
Yeah, if you want to have two meetings, that's
I was
fine.
gonna say, can they do
Yeah, I
that?
have
too?
to.
Anything else that needs to be brought before the board this evening? Meeting adjourned.
Right at